the show.
Exactly.
True.
I mean, look, this is what all a panel is. It's just incoherent noises. Welcome, 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 one and all, to yet another episode of WhickTV, a cross-ideological space where certainty comes to die. We talk about issues from the political to the cultural, from the silly to the serious. And today, we're discussing religion, right? Religion has been a part of human development for centuries, millennia even.
Yeah, more than that.
But
Billions of years.
yeah, but but as we have progressed as a society and as a culture, many say we should move away from religion, that religion has done more harm than good to us, and that we need to break free from it. Others say that no, religion is an intrinsic part of who we are, and in fact, something that actually benefits and keeps us from our worst excesses. And tonight we're going to discuss that. We're going to talk about what is religion, right? How does it benefit us? How does it hurt us? And what we should do about it going forward. And I have assembled a wonderful team together to talk about this issue. Thank you all for being here. I hope you all are doing good. You all feeling good? Feeling feeling pretty great? Right?
Feeling blessed. Blessed to be here.
A blessed day.
Hallelujah.
Well, wonderful. I guess, right? To start us off then, Mr. Blessed Day, P.F. Jung, give us your intro.
Sure, yeah, hello. What do I believe? I guess, Wick, your statement was some people believe we should move away from religion. Well, regardless of whether or not religion is a good or a bad thing, it's an inevitable thing. And so I don't think you can move away from religion any more so than you can move away from ideology or belief systems in general. Everyone is religious to one degree or another because everyone has a fundamental belief system. And so I guess my position is better we respect the religious traditions that have been around while adapting them to the modern environment and understanding. For example, the reason that a lot of religions have sexual taboos is because for most of human history, there was no birth control, and or any type of contraceptive or protection against STDs. And as we learned in the AIDS crisis, one bad STD can wipe out an entire population, or could come close. And so, obviously, any religious belief system that had in its list of traditions a taboo against promiscuity, I guess to put it broadly, that would have had an evolutionary advantage. And so obviously religion has some advantage there. Now, of course, nowadays, with contraceptives and modern technology, it's reasonable to say, well, maybe that tradition is no longer relevant to our current environment. Thus, we have an updated interpretation of religion. But to discard the whole traditions entirely, not only do I believe is impossible, I believe it is also foolish.
Well, thank you. I'm sure we'll get into the details as we go. First time guest on my channel, and we'll see how he does. Brutilities, is that how you say it?
Perfect. Thank you. Yep.
Go ahead.
It's me. Just have a Twitter. So I think religion itself is just purely a primitive thing. It explained everything that we didn't know until we had a better explanation. So as time's gone on, we've needed it less in the first place. So, for one, to keep it around would just inhibit progress that we could have. And then as well, we just don't need it now. I know that like everyone has their own beliefs, but beliefs derived from like a supernatural, spiritual place, which is really, everyone is their own, There's no like empirical outside thing with which everyone can have a spiritual belief. Everything's a little bit different. Whereas other belief systems and like reality all have things that point towards it. So we should probably get rid of the thing that everyone can see versus only some can.
Thank you for being here. We'll see how it goes. No stranger to my channel. Fairy Queen, go ahead. What do you think?
Hey. Here, I'm not cruising for a bruising tonight. What I'm hoping tonight is that we'll have an interesting and nuanced discussion about the function of religion in society, because I think that there is a lot to be said for learning about religion, being well educated about religion, reading the Bible, reading religious texts, and having a deep understanding of its historical importance. However, I do think that as a whole, not only are we moving away from being religious, as I think that like numerous statistics tend to show. So, for instance, I'm looking at this article in the New Yorker about Christian nationalism. It says here in 1999, Gallup found that 70% of Americans belong to a church, a synagogue, or a mosque. In 2020, the number was 47%, for the first time in nearly 100 years of polling. Worshippers were the minority, and I'm sure that you could find plenty of other examples of research and Pew Research that show that slowly over time, attendance in the pews has been in decline. But the question isn't whether or not it is going away. The question is whether or not it should go away. And to answer that question, I think that we need to really nail down what it is that we mean when we say religion. I know that I do this, I've done this many times. I know that it sounds like a very simple question. Like, I know that when we say religion, we probably think of a belief system, right? So you think of the thing that you do when you go to church, right? So you think of a separate belief system, right? So there are three different ways that we usually argue about religion. The first one is the way that everybody was talking about in about 2010 and 2011, 2012, right? So this is the four horsemen. So Sam Harris, I don't remember the other two, but Christopher Hitchens was certainly the second one, right? So everybody was arguing about, does God exist? Is there proof that God exists?
Richard Dawkins? Is that
Richard Dawkins? Yes, that's the third one. But there's a fourth one. I don't remember who that one was.
Daniel Dennett.
Okay, thank you. But the point is that that was the level of what talking about religion was. It was disproving literal facts about the Bible and about religion and trying to see whether or not they were literally true. Then it seemed as though we moved into a Jordan Peterson era or an Alain de Botton. And if you don't know who that is, that's the founder of the School of Life channel, right? So then we started having conversations about, well, okay, maybe there are aspects of religion that are bad. So maybe it's discriminatory against gay people and against trans people. Maybe it's bad. Like maybe there are specific things, but we appreciate it for its literary and metaphoric qualities, right? So Jordan Peterson, I'm sure everybody here is familiar with that, right? He's had many lectures about the psychological meaning of religion. He makes references to Carl Jung, to Friedrich Nietzsche, right? So there's that understanding. So maybe it's not literally true, but maybe it's metaphorically true. But there's a third way we can talk about religion that I think needs to be emphasized that many people have forgotten, which is that for historically speaking, what your religious identity was. It was not this separate thing that you did on Sunday or that you did on Shabbat. And it was separate from your political beliefs and from the food that you ate, from the person that you married, from the way you lived in society. Oftentimes, your religious identity was often extremely intermingled with your ethnic identity and with your political identity, with your sense of national identity. And it's one of the primary reasons why we have a separation of church and state within the United States, because of how disastrous and how murderous that conflation was throughout specifically within England, but also throughout numerous other countries. So all this to say, I hope we get into it. I hope that we have a good conversation. I think, however, there are strong reasons to debate against the third understanding of religion and its conflation that we can have with its ethnic and national identity. Sorry.
No, it's fine. Thank you. Verbosity is usually welcome, but we try to keep it brief in the openings. Appreciate you. Jebtan.
Don't listen to him.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, I think we should absolutely keep religion around. Again, I challenge the idea that we could do otherwise, as P.F. Jung was saying, but one of the things that I think it's important for that people haven't touched on is just when we're coming down to individuals and their lives and what gives them hope and what gives them structure and what gives them sort of a reason to act out of self-interest when self-interest is the only other present thing in their life. Religion tends to be a driving factor for that. And I think a lot of the damage that religion may have caused historically is almost, it's happening less and less as time goes on. And a lot of people would say, oh, well, it's because there are less religious people, but I don't think that's the case. I think it's just life has gotten infinitely more complex and abstract, and a lot less of it happens, a lot less of life happens in the sort of face-to-face aggressive way that life happened before. And so people and religious people are getting more intellectual and getting better at what P.F. Jung was saying, which is adapting religious interpretation to our times today. And it's still very useful for keeping people's lives structured and giving them a reason to act outside of their own self-interest. So I think we should keep it.
Thank you. Thank you for keeping it brief, and thank you for being here, Jebtan. I'm curious to see how this goes. Yeah. Sunday, we'll go with you next.
Sure. So the question before the panel is whether religion is a force for good or ill in society, which begs the question, what is it? It's instructive that the word religion has taken on a meaning in recent history that it did not bear for the vast majority of its usage. Its Latin root religio referred not to a specific kind of creed or organizational structure, certainly not to some principle of blind belief in the mystical or the supernatural, but rather to a universal human capacity to treat things with more or less of what we today would call gravitas. Someone who takes something with seriousness and solemnity has religio about it, and someone who doesn't correspondingly lacks religio. It was only due to social and political strife and the emergence of cultic organizations competing for the cultural dominance of ancient and medieval societies that over the last 2 millennia, the term has taken on more definite meanings until in present day, when we say religion, we typically mean something of the essence of specifically Jewish, Christian, and Islamic culture. I highlight this not because the ancient etymology of a word should absolutely determine how we understand the things it's taken to signify in the present, but to highlight that when we ask some variation on, is religion a force for good, we too often pack in and exclude things in the category religion on the basis of whether or not their presence would contribute to something having a passing resemblance to something like Christianity or Islam. And often, too, we invent social structures like Christianity and Islam in form by applying that same tendency to other cultures where these don't necessarily apply. The recent invention of Hinduism out of an immense array of independent cultural groups and practices is a case in point. This will not do. Even disregarding that the so-called secular religious or secular sacred divide originates from a specifically Christian history, I argue it is not the object of our beliefs or the forms by which we organize, but the methods by which we determine true from false and better from worse that should commend some social form over another. A culture that places weight upon trust, good faith, methodological rigor, and standards of ethical conduct, a culture with religio, in effect, is required for the good functioning of even secular and scientifically oriented societies in the modern sense. And this is the case whether or not such societies find through rigorous scientific and philosophical methods that they exist in a world shared by literal gods and spirits, or one which isn't. For societies that don't possess these qualities, the problem is not that their objects of belief are supernatural or quote-unquote religious, but that they're held without justification. Indeed, the problem is that they are quite irreligious with respect to the things that make a society functional and sane. And so I argue very strongly that religion properly understood is definitely a force for good in society and is in fact necessary for it.
Okay, we'll see how it goes. Last but certainly not least, no stranger to the show, right? The origin story of Wick himself. Prime Kai, go ahead.
Hello. And before I give my opening, I just wanted to shout out my friend PF here. I haven't seen you in such a long time. I actually
Good to
checked,
see, sir.
and it's been a year since we last interacted.
Far too
And
long.
I've absolutely missed you. We gotta make something happen. But okay.
Hell yeah, man.
So what is the use of religion? I mean, I think religion is actually quite useful. I think it's proven useful for scammers. I think it's proven useful for misogynists. I think it's proven extremely useful for predators. There's a reason why these institutions endure, right? Most of it's simply because of inertia. This is what we've done in the past, so we'll do that in the future. This was our organizing principle before, so it'll be our organizing principle now. I don't see the value generally that religion provides that cannot be replicated in some other form. Now, it's not to say that as of now, right, in the year of our Lord 2023, that we have all those mechanisms, right? That we have the institutional underpinnings, right? Infrastructure, yes, infrastructure to necessarily replace everything that religion provides. And there are some benefits to the individual, right, individual person, but nothing that would necessitate something that has caused an endless amount of suffering. And let's address that rather than just being kind of up our own asses on the philosophy of it all. Thank you.
Speaking of endless suffering, let's start the panel, gang. Let's get to the open, and we'll just go with that. So if you have trouble getting in, let me see your hands. But otherwise, welcome to hell, brothers and sisters. Welcome to hell. Okay.
Yeah,
That's
I'd like to
apropos.
jump in real quick to kind of nip in the bud. This is always just like the most elementary argument against religion. No, it's useful for scammers, useful for liars, useful for misogyny. It's also been useful for scientists. Almost every major scientific discovery we made prior to probably the 21st century was done largely through the church. It's been useful for charities. I would say inarguably about 90% of charitable contributions, again, before the 21st century, happened through religious institutions. If you're going to talk about how useful it's been for only bad things, we should probably talk about how useful it's been for good things. It's built some of the greatest civilizations in the world. Again, built the largest charitable organizations in the world. It's built the largest
just for my
and to be very clear, it's built the largest child predator sex ring this world has ever known. So
that's not true. The U.S. education system is
hang on.
in the Catholic Church.
But I'll address it, right? So, like, you say that because of the scientific discoveries that it was used to make, right? And you're absolutely correct on this. That it's a sign that it must be good, right? Well, I guess then rich people simply must be good. Because at the same time, right?
So, hold on. Wait. Argue with my argument. I did not make the argument that you are saying I made that you're arguing against. So I'm going to clarify that.
Okay, great. Anyway,
yeah, argue against whoever you're arguing against.
You already said that, Jeb10, Prime Guy, quickly, and then other people need to go. So
okay.
after Prime
Guy,
rich people,
so rich people must be good because at the same time, when those same scientific discoveries were being made, that the art that fills our museums was being made as well for rich people because they had the money. Right, the art was made because they had the money. They had the organizing ability to do such a thing. Same thing for the church. The church had the money, and so that's where discoveries are made. They had the institution will have to handle early science. So yeah, that means nothing to me. Any organization could have done it if they had that money. All right, done.
Okay, so then, well, hold on. I've got a very direct. It's very succinct. Every argument you just made, Prime Kai, for the good things of religion probably would have been done by a non-religious body if they had the same position. Also goes for the bad things, right? What we're getting at is
Jeb, very quickly, Jeb,
directly.
Jeb, no, I just need to. Jeb, please. It's causing me, Jeb, it's causing me tremendous pain. Okay, it is not the case, and correct me if I'm misquoting you, that the vast majority of science up till the 21st century was done through the church. I don't know what you're smoking to come
irrefutably the case. Yeah.
That is absurd.
It was done through a religious body, yes.
What do you mean? Do you mean by a state that happened to have like a state religion? That doesn't count.
No.
Brutilities. Just go in there. Throw some bows.
There's a huge fucking difference between somebody being religious making a scientific discovery and then the religion itself making the scientific discoveries. And if I'm not mistaken, Galileo himself was like sought after for like apostasy heresy. How the fuck does that happen? Like,
does it mean like atheistic humanists were philosophers hundreds of years ago?
Yeah,
there were atheists thousands of years ago.
Discoveries that weren't sponsored by the church, but a vast majority of them were either sponsored by the church or done utilizing again the institutional power, wealth, and care of the church.
Wealth, yeah.
Yes,
exactly. Yeah, they had the money.
I'm washing my hands of this exchange, but just point of information for anybody who's perplexed. That is factually not true. Nobody serious on this side of the argument that religion has utility for society or is positive in any way abides by this. It's an insane assertion.
Well, I'm curious. Fairy Queen, I see your hand. But I'm curious if P.F. Jung shares that assertion or if Sunday stands alone on his side of the aisle.
It gets complicated because Sunday claimed it was atheists or something a few hundred years ago that came up with these discoveries. It's like, well, I would argue.
Which discoveries? I'm a little bit curious where your mind went.
I don't know. What did you mean when you said that?
Okay, well, I'm not the one who's asserting that the church is responsible for all scientific discoveries.
Okay, well,
up to the 21st century.
my point is Enlightenment ethics.
You realize we're in the 21st century, right? Like, that's really recent. Just making sure we're all on the same page here about what century it is. Okay, continue.
To speak. My point would be that Enlightenment ethics evolved out of Christianity. And the scientific discovery, what percentage of what discoveries, I think that's a meaningless conversation. To me, the more interesting route to go down.
That's wrong, by the way.
Thank you. Is how do you have a moral system that is not predicated on what are fundamentally religious claims and ideas? for example, the idea that all men are created equal is a religious idea. And our entire atheist society is built on that religious idea. And I don't see how, for example, one can say, well, slavery is wrong. We take that for granted. I would argue we take that for granted because, again, we grew up in a system that is utterly conditioned by the claim that all people are endowed by their creator with inalienable rights. I don't see how you can get to the moral claim that slavery is wrong or various other moral misgivings are wrong without ultimately getting to a moral axiom that is more or less a faith claim, that there's just something about human beings that is unique and valuable and divine and special. Because without that, you can just, as societies have done for thousands of years and majority of human history, just engage in whatever social structure.
Well, hang on. There's a number of problems with that, but the first one that immediately occurs to me is that we live in a medium that is saturated. Hang on, very quickly. That is saturated with vegans.
I don't believe you when
who
you
do
say
not
very
assert that
briefly,
any
that's all.
particular organism is divine or special, and yet nonetheless advocate for the
Vegans are
well-being
the
of
devil.
other creatures.
Yes, that's true.
Well, I would say the fact that there are people with backwards opinions in society.
No. But you're making an anthropological case. You were
not
questioning
an
whether or not somebody could have a moral system without reference to
No.
a religious precept.
No, I'm not
That's
questioning they can have a
factually
moral
untrue.
system.
That's not borne out by the empirical fact of the matter.
I'm questioning whether or not they would have a functional moral system. And I would say a moral system that does not say slavery is wrong is not functional. So you can
But they
have
do
a
say
shitty moral
slavery is
system.
wrong. But they do say slavery is wrong. In fact, they're against animal
does?
containment as well.
Vegans?
No. I am throwing my foot down. Veganism.
The V word is
the fuck
banned.
that out of everyone. Veganism is not up for debate today. We're not doing a vegan debate. Please, God, no. If there is a God, maybe he's punishing me right now for even questioning his existence by doing vegan debate shit. Fairy Queen has the floor next. Go ahead, Fairy.
Oh my God.
Have a few questions, and a few questions specifically for Jeb, since you brought up the church, and the church is the one. I would really like you to be more specific than that. What do you mean by the church? Do you mean the Roman Catholic Church? Do you mean the Orthodox Byzantine Church? And the reason I ask is because of this. Like you mentioned, for instance, that a great deal of the church sponsored charities, it sponsored scientific innovations, both of which are true. But it's also true that in religious and nationalist conflicts, that a lot of the research that was done, many of the charity organizations that existed, were often burned and they were often destroyed in religious disputes. So I'll give you an example of one right now. So one of them was Henry VIII. So when Henry VIII took power and when he became the head of the Church of England and he cut off the Catholic Church in Rome, one of the first things that he did was destroying the monastic system, like throughout England, to reap its wealth and suppress its political opposition. So I'm reading this quote here. So between 1536 and 1540, he took over 800 monasteries, abbeys, and nunneries and friaries, some of which had accumulated great wealth and land. And these monasteries were often used as charity organizations, and he plundered them in order to enrich himself and in order to enrich the Church of England, right? So that's an example. And then the second one I have to ask is, what is it that we define as a religious dispute, right? So there are many examples of temples that have been destroyed, libraries that have been burned between two different state systems that had a state religion. Would you define that, though, as a religious conflict, right? So when Caesar burned the Library of Alexandria, like, do you define that? Do you consider that to be a religious conflict and an example because they are people of two different religions, or is what? And I asked, I'm sorry if that's a bit confusing, but
No, it's not. It's not confusing. It's just sort of like I wish the questions were getting cut off as quickly as my statements were, because people are misunderstanding my statements with their questions. For your first one, I mean any church. Like, I'm going very far back, like all the way to like the Egyptians discovering mathematics happened through a religious scientific pursuit. So like there are different churches. I'm not even limiting it to Christian churches. There are different churches and different religious organizations that have constantly and consistently, because religion was one of the things that got people to focus not on their farms and their fields to eat, but on the nature of being and to study the nature of being. But hold on. Your question was like 3 times longer than what I just said, so let's not jump in yet. The second question totally goes to exactly what I was saying to Prime Kai that I got cut off saying, which is why it was important to say, and I shouldn't have been cut off, which is that I'm not saying that religious is ultimately a force for good solely because of like a resume or a track record. What I'm saying is when you try to attribute every awful thing in the world to the church because of their institutional power and the fact that they have their hands in almost everything, so they're going to have their hands in a lot of bad things and a lot of good things, that's not the argument I'm making.
I don't know, dude. You just attributed them all of science.
No, I didn't. I didn't say all of science is
up till this
Christianity. What I said
century.
was, if you are going to acknowledge every bad thing the church has had their hands in, you also have to then acknowledge, if you are being good faith and honest, all of the great and tremendous and life-altering things that the church has had their hands in, namely almost every single
But what
major
has
scientific
religion,
convention that
just
brought
real
us to
quick,
this age.
Jeb10, what has religion done for us lately?
Like I said, they still, like the largest, the most charitable
Today.
portions
The last
of
bulwark against cultural Marxism,
the most charitable like populations in every developed Western nation are their religious populations. It is what gets people to focus on things outside of their own self-interest more often than not.
Religion gave us the
Killers,
Killers, which is
you
a
know, with all
phenomenal
the
Christian
cancer
rock
That
band.
is based
by the
too,
way.
and Kings of Leon, even though they were
Is
kind
Kings
of
of
like
Leon
done being
too?
Christian.
Wow,
Bunch of
the
PKs,
anti-religious
dude.
folks are having a rough time right now. Then,
Yeah.
Can I respond?
no.
Thank you. Yeah, so this is a kind of a mix of response to PF and Jebtan here. So Jebtan goes and tells us that, well, you can't like attribute just the bad without attributing the good, and which is fair, right, for any organization or for any subject of discussion. Absolutely, right. And I think I acknowledged in my opening statement that there are individual benefits to religion, and that's fair. My point was that it can all be replaced. So, but going off to PF, you had brought up this idea that religions brought up an evolutionary advantage for restricting sex. Like, what? Sure. In the most obtuse sense of that, I mean, I guess. But let's understand the reasons why they did this. Obviously, was not because they had germ theory. Fair enough. But it's because it was to enforce patriarchal ideals and values. Right. That was the point, to restrict women's fertility for the purposes of anything they wanted, really. And like, there is no reason why that wouldn't have been replicated as it has like all across the world through other means of brutality against women. So like women's fertility was always going to be controlled. It wasn't that religion gave us something extra, right? It gave us something more pernicious to get rid of that we're still dealing with now. Because true, governments could do the same thing, right? As Jebtan said, like a government could have imposed these things, but governments fall. Religion stays, right? Like a fart in the air.
Okay, hold on. Just to respond to that, because I think the evolutionary argument is important. It's not an obtuse view. I think it's obvious because, I mean, I'm sure you would agree that if all contraception was eliminated tomorrow, that would pose a lot of health risks to a lot of people. Like, AIDS did almost kill way more people than it did.
Yeah, that's a granted, but they
do you know one of the reasons why?
Yeah.
But do you know one of the reasons why?
In the absence of,
but do you know one of the reasons,
Mr. Sunday, Mr. President?
Do you know one of the reasons why?
Mr. President,
do you know one of the reasons? Do you know one of the reasons why?
In the absence,
you might know
of
if he
birth
finishes
control,
his answer.
In the absence of contraceptives, in the absence of that technology, and in the absence of any treatment for any virus or whatever that is spread sexually, then obviously there would be an evolutionary advantage to those societies that enforced a form of contraception that was social and not technological. So that obviously provided an advantage. The exact same thing goes for marriage. Why is marriage such a human universal across different religions? Because pair bonding behavior, which is an evolutionary behavior, is one that is advantageous to raising children. So say, well, no, marriage is just this patriarchal construct to imprison women. It's like, okay, that's one theory.
But
the evolutionary
both
theory
can be true, right?
Yeah.
Like, it can be a patriarchal structure, and it can also provide advantages, right? I'm not saying
absolutely, yes, sure, I agree with that for sure.
That like
it is patriarchal.
Provide
there are plenty of patriarchal
advantage, right? Some sort of it doesn't provide some sort of advantage that wouldn't have been replicated otherwise because we were going to brutalize women. We still are.
Well, hold on.
May I ask,
wait.
just real quick, may
Go
I
ahead.
ask you, Prime, then, in that case, what unique disadvantages does religion bring, in your opinion? Like, if
Perniciousness.
it's perniciousness. Elaborate.
Yeah. So, like, Catholic Church, right? Again, the greatest child sex ring of all time, right?
Besides
like
the US
going
education
back
system.
centuries for its abuse, right? Like there are governments, as Jebtown again said, and it was fair, that have sponsored, have allowed abuses towards children and the vulnerable, right? Like there are other organizations. It happens all the time. It happens in our public schools. But all those organizations fall, right? They are challenged and they are discredited. But not for religion. Catholic Church, understanding. I think some people still don't understand the extent of the abuse. But even with headlines, like just the other week, that 12,000 or so, and I think it was Indiana, were abused, right? In living memory, of course, right? Still, despite that, people go to church or a Catholic church. They give to this organization. If it was fucking McDonald's, another worldwide organization, that would have been gone. It would have been wiped out. The perniciousness is the problem.
I want to get in after these guys, but they all.
Everyone has their hands out.
I
want to
respond to
Brutilities first, then Fairy Queen, then Sunday. That's the order.
Yeah, I think it's what you're saying isn't wrong, but the problem with it is that like, if the public schools, if we find a pedo in public school, we don't get rid of the public school, we get rid of the pedo. The problem isn't getting rid of religion because of the pedos, it's because they don't get rid of the individual who committed the act.
If it was systematic, no, not just individual. This is a systematic child abuse, right? And that's the thing that's the problem. That's baked into it.
Priests around like chess pieces, I get it, yeah. But to get all of the chess pieces off the board instead of throwing the board in the furnace, that's the issue. Just to like clarify, yeah.
Okay, Fairy Queen.
Actually, I'm gonna wait for a minute. Sunday, why don't you go first?
A major cause for how devastating the AIDS crisis was, besides obviously how deadly the disease is, was that conservative attitudes of contempt towards homosexuals, as well as contempt towards things like public sex ed and whatnot, meant that there was widespread misinformation about how to avoid the disease. It was treated as a gay-only thing that typically could only be... A lot of people were under the illusion it was only acquired through illicit drug use or only through gay sex and things of that sort. And as well as the stigma against homosexuals, again, religious in origin, caused a lot of their activities to move underground in unsafe environments and in unsafe cultures. The AIDS crisis was exacerbated by orders of magnitude by conservative religious beliefs.
Actually, I believe I read an article in that
conservatives also pushed for like bringing it to the attention of the government. Yes,
actually, heterosexual sex did not have the same probability of spreading the AIDS virus, and arguably one of the crimes of the.
I'm sorry. Are you? Just to be clear.
Let me finish my point.
Sunday, you gotta let him respond, and then
arguably,
no, I don't.
One of the crimes,
just to be clear,
of putting that in place.
Just to be clear, before you continue, I want clarification on a point.
One of the crimes of the conservative policy was that by making it seem like the gay community was not disproportionately at risk, money that otherwise would have gone to prevention for the gay community went to other areas that did not demonstrate as much of a risk. So no,
are you in all seriousness asserting under your face
if I may
that heterosexual couples are more immune to HIV than gay couples are?
They are less likely to get it through heterosexual sex.
I could be.
Yes.
I'll say this. I could be wrong. I believe that is scientifically the case.
No,
you're very wrong.
100. No, it is.
How is AIDS passed? How is AIDS passed?
It is passed. Yes, it is a blood-to-blood contact disease, which is why, or blood-to-bodily fluid contact disease, which is why.
Contact. Okay, fluid-to-fluid contact.
Can I finish? The reason why anal sex causes it more often, and the reason why the gay community gets it more often because they have a lot more anal sex, is because you get micro tears in your rectum from anal sex that open up more of that bodily fluid to blood contact. It is not just fluid to fluid contact. It's why you can't get it from kissing. You get it from getting bodily fluid into your blood vessels, which is why the micro tears that happen in your rectum during anal sex make it easier for infected semen
It is also
to
passed
infect your
vaginally,
bloodstream.
and it is also
Not
passed
nearly
More
as
detail than
often.
I was aware of,
Not
but
nearly as often.
let's go.
That
I
is the
believe that's true.
specific vehicle as to why anal sex is far higher risk for AIDS than vaginal sex is. It is a fact. It's
And to
not
be
even
clear,
disputed.
Sunday is correct. Sunday is correct.
Heterosexual couples
Sunday is
engage
correct that
in the same
conservative
activity.
At
politicians.
far lower rates.
Hold on. Just to Sunday's point, because he's correct that conservative politicians operating under the arbitrage of religion did exacerbate the AIDS crisis. Reagan was an asshole.
Not even politicians.
in the
Reagan
most
was
extreme
indifferent.
sense.
I
So,
agree. I just don't think we need
religion
to
can do a lot of
pretend that
bad,
there's
but
no
the AIDS
scientific
thing
difference.
is not a real one from Sunday.
Fairy Queen, go
Sorry,
ahead.
what? I couldn't catch a word of that. What did you say?
He said you were correct.
About politicians, conservative politicians operating under the guise
No, I
of
wasn't
religion.
talking about conservative politicians. That was also an issue, but what I was referring to specifically was cultural attitudes of contempt towards homosexual people, as well as towards things like sex education and contraception, which would have saved untold numbers of lives.
I believe the research on sex education is not as solid as people
I
think it is.
am pretty certain you have no idea what you're talking about.
Okay, well, we
Okay.
got to get
Well,
other people in here, and I'm going to
for
be
what
a
it's
little,
worth,
a little
Sunday,
more liberal with the mute
I
button
feel
if
quite
you guys
similar.
don't listen to me. I will ask you to stop.
Yeah, but
and
the
then
difference
I will
is that's
make you
stupid.
stop, please. Fairy Queen, go ahead.
So I think the point of bringing up the AIDS crisis example is to show the danger of religion having a full swing back into society is the way it gets mixed up in politics, and specifically the way that it can be used to inculcate religious attitudes into law. And a good example of this is the Catholic Church's influence in Ireland. So abortion laws, that's an example, right? So for instance, I'm reading right here, in 2012, Irish abortion law received worldwide attention on the death of 𝕻𝖎𝖏, which is the reason why the legislation, the Regulation of Termination Act, that was passed in 2018, right? The right to be able to divorce freely in Ireland, the legal act that allowed that to happen, that was passed in 1995. A big reason for why these laws took as long as they did to be passed within that country had to do with religious attitudes within Ireland. There's another example of an institutional abuse that happened, which is the Magdalene laundry. For a while, because of religious attitudes towards sex, many teenage girls were sent to these laundries. They had their children kidnapped and sent far away. And to this day, I don't think that they have received the amount of money that they have requested in exchange for the abuses. They found pits with these women's bodies where they were thrown into after they died. That's the reason, why we're on this side of the issue. It's people are entitled to believe personally whatever it is that they please. But when you ask people, when you encourage this, and when you ask people to become more and more invested in this, the impact that can have in law and on the way that people are allowed to live in their society, that's when it becomes dangerous.
Okay, so just before you respond, and I'll let you respond, $5 from Muda Agarwal to say it's interesting and disappointing that the discussion on religion that has expanded literally thousands of years is focused on the last 70. Mad Honeybee for $5. Do any panelists plan to bring up any other religions besides the Abrahamic ones? Christianity, Judaism, Islam. Enjoy your money. Thank you.
I'm a Scientologist, so I would like to shout out my people.
That's a good, and that's a good point, and that's one of the points that I'm trying. That I think we keep laying into this. We keep circling back to this idea that on our side we believe that religion has done immense good for the world, and then you guys are saying, but yeah, it's also done immense bad, and then we can say, oh yeah, but it's done immense good, and then we can go back and forth. What you asked Prime was the right question. What is uniquely bad about religion? I don't think the perniciousness is uniquely bad about religion. We've seen atheists and agnostics be racist. We've seen them create systems that are racist and misogynist and anti-gay, and we've seen the same perniciousness in non-religious context. I did understand your point.
No, you didn't.
Wrong.
Clearly, this shows you did not.
Okay, sure. There are no systems that you say that people continue to invest in that are a-religious that do bad things ever. You're right. That's
not what I said. Again, you don't understand a thing that I said. I said the opposite of that. I acknowledge that a secular system can create abuses. I said that's absolutely the case.
What's the unique perniciousness then?
Yes, it's okay. Let me explain it to you again. I'll do it slowly for you. All right. So listen closely. Okay, so religion has a sort of protection within people's minds, as it is above common forms of restrictions, of legislation, of jurisdiction. Religion hangs above it all because it's for
Okay,
the
so you're
Almighty
just
or whatever
okay,
that
cool.
might be. And
So I
because
understand.
of that, when
So
there
it's just
are
you're just wrong.
abuses, they don't. Hold on, like I said, I was going to explain it slowly for you, so I'm going to do that,
Cool.
right? And because
Sure.
of that, when abuses happen, they don't respond to them in the same way. Once
Mhm.
again, if there had been a secular organization that had been discovered to be the biggest child abuse ring of all time,
Sure.
right? That organization would have been dismantled. But still, people say, "Well,
Sure.
I have my faith. I have my faith, and so I'm going to go to this church. I'm
Mhm.
going to support them.
Hold
I'm
on,
gonna
I got to
support
respond
these."
to this because
Okay,
he cut
go
in
ahead.
to do
You
this.
do?
So.
Pretty sure
You
the
do?
CIA
You literally
meets that
asked me.
criteria.
$5
No, I know, but
I'm going
let
to
me.
interrupt everyone with $5
Oh my
for
God,
fondue to
I'm-
say, I remember the fear of AIDS was that it functioned like a normal disease, education having to explain you couldn't get it from water fountains. Thank you for the money, fondue.
Okay.
Okay, now go
So-
ahead. And then we do have to get other people in here, so.
Now that I've got a very clear explanation, I can tell you why you're wrong. You know why the Catholic Church isn't the only church? Because the biggest resistance to religious organizations has come from fucking religious people. Martin Luther saw a lot of the things you're talking about way back in the day. He saw them allowing people to pay for indulgences, pay for their salvation. Saw priests out in the
You
streets
can
having
pay
sex
for
with
indulgences.
prostitutes.
What was his opinion on Jews? You want to
Oh my
remind us?
God! Please
Was it worse than Karl
shut
Marx's?
the fuck up. Okay.
A little bit, actually.
Yes, we know. Every good person believed in bad things. That's fine. A lot of bad people believed in good things. Let me fucking finish what I'm saying. A lot of the biggest not a lot of, again, the vast majority of the largest resistance to toxic religiosity has been from religious people for religious things. And this is where it comes to the truly unique positive impact of religion is what I was talking about. Like we said, we got to go back
Produces
behind the last
specimens like
70
this.
years, which is that the one thing you couldn't replace back in the day with all these scientific revolutions that happened in early civilization with religion is the drive.
Up to the 21st century.
That was what was unique to religion. Was back in that time, there was no government that was going to be built around studying the nature of being. They were going to be built around getting people's farms to grow more
My dude,
food,
Plato's
things like
Republic.
that.
What are you talking about?
That was
They-
after generations and generations of religious studies of the nature of being. What I'm saying is the one thing about religion
No,
you
that was
could not
first
replace
generation philosophers.
Bro, philosophy is not the first generation of fucking scientific thought. I know you're so fucking philosophy book brained that you don't understand
What are you?
that.
Hang on,
But
hang on. Wait.
but
What is
the
the first one?
original
What are you
studies
talking
of the
about?
nature of being came from the church. That is what kicked off a lot of the ideas.
No,
that
that's why
philosophical-
Aquinas
that
and
philosoph-
Augustine were Platonists and Aristotelians.
No, but
You're
all their
wrong.
thought was based in thought that came before them. Like all of philosophy is derivative. You know this by reading philosophy. It's all derivative from religious thought before them.
No, it's actually
It is
pretty much
elaboration
all.
on religious thought before
No,
them.
it's not.
Yes,
You're wrong.
It
I'm
is
sorry.
elaboration and critique on religious thought that came
No,
before
it's
them.
not. You're
Yes,
very
it is.
mistaken.
Okay,
you
Sunday,
are very mistaken.
Sunday, I'm going to give you the floor now, but a question from 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙 for $2.
Huh?
Hitler drank water. Are you Hitler? That's from 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙.
Nice.
Hey.
Is that addressed to me?
Yes.
Hitler drank water. Am I Hitler?
Yes. I'm
good
reading the
question.
$2 super chat.
The fact that it's
I don't
taking
know.
you
Let's
this
see how
long to
this
answer
panel
is
goes. Okay,
suspicious.
give it
I don't know.
a bit.
I'm thinking maybe a little bit of
Yeah,
a Hitler in him.
jeez.
Sunday, you
President
got
Sunday.
the floor. And I see your hand, Fairy Queen. I'm sorry. I knew you wanted to.
No, Fairy Queen can go next. She gave me the floor before.
Okay, Fairy Queen.
Are you sure? Oh, okay. So you asked specifically, Jeb, what is the unique perniciousness of religion?
Mhm.
And I think I can answer that in 3 different parts. The first one is, I'm sorry, and I am robbing this from Christopher Hitchens, so somebody else can find the quote specifically where he says this. But the essential thing that you buy into when you are a religious person is that this earth and all of its earthly pleasures, the music, the poetry, the food, the sex, the dancing that you have to do, that all of this is nothing compared to what you get after you die. That death and that the world after this is better and more important than the world and the life that you are living currently in the now. And I think that is something that can be very morally pernicious. And again, somebody can find the quote for me. I think it was the Archbishop of Canterbury during the 60s. And I am paraphrasing somebody, and I apologize, I couldn't find the quote. He said something to the effect of, what does it matter if the atom bomb drops? That just means a few more million souls will go to heaven at an earlier rate, right? It turns the idea and the concept of human life and dying and human suffering, it cheapens it. It makes us less likely to care about the now because you're more likely to care about the future paradise and the beyond. That's Christopher Hitchens' take. But my take would be the unique perniciousness of religion for me personally is that an intrinsic idea is that it is morally acceptable to accept the suffering of innocent people in exchange for spiritual reward. So like this is a common question, why does suffering exist? That's theodicy, right? So why are children born with bone cancer? The answer that you usually get from a religious person is, well, like you have to suffer and it's a test of God's love for you. It's a test of your faith. And if, it's very difficult and it's very hard, but eventually you will go to heaven and eventually you will receive your reward. And my position would be that I think that that is a selfish thing to accept. I think that it is selfish to accept suffering in the world around you, to accept the idea that a world was created where you are born imperfect, you are born unwell, and that you're willing to accept that in exchange and willing to go along with that and to follow all these precepts in exchange so that a deity can reward you for your faith. I think actually in that case, it's actually more morally acceptable to go to hell in this instance, as opposed to receive a heavenly reward for being a faithful penitent. Okay. So that would be, that's what I think is the morally pernicious.
I don't know, dude. Hell's pretty bad.
I know you want to respond, but I want to give some other people a chance here. I know Jung.
I'll write it down so I remember.
Write it down. Jung, I want to give you space to respond as well. I know you've been interrupted a few times, so do you have a response to that? If not, we'll move on.
What'd you say, Jung? Sorry,
yeah,
Jung.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. No, I would. When this thread is closed, I would like to move this into a different direction.
Okay, fair enough.
I'd like to add something real quick, though, if I could.
Sure.
Yeah. To go along with what you were saying, Fairy Queen, it's the perniciousness is basically divine authority. Right, and to go back to what you were saying, 𝕵𝖎𝖙, yes, religion is its biggest critic, in a sense, sure, because that's why there's so many denominations, but all those still go back to divine authority in the first place, so they all might be wrong, but they're all still right. And then they can say everyone else is wrong and exact that selfish, oh, well, you're damned unless you come with us on everybody else. So they're not really bettering the faith in any of those denominations. They're all equally as abhorrent. And then secondly, just to go back to the fucking every religious every
most of the scientific inventions come from religion.
That shit you're just mixing, like, almost every scientist back in history was religious. But then if it went against the religion, they were increasingly
persecuted,
criticized.
I want to know who he has in mind. I want to know what he thinks of. Like who does he?
I mean, I don't know that I'm going to actually have the time to properly respond to that, but I mean,
you just give
one name three,
because I can already give one of what I'm saying. So please.
I mean, but my issue is you guys are going. No,
no. Go back to the person,
but I want to preempt because I know because you guys continuously try to misrepresent. I'm not saying that when these discoveries were made, they were immediately accepted by the church, but they were still sponsored and found by the church. And then the church largely came around to all of them, essentially, and continue to sponsor more. They are, even if you are saying they do it by being bumbling fools and constantly paying for discoveries that spit in their face or whatever, they're still the ones sponsoring and getting this research done. Our calendar was set by, I think it was Judaic priests. Charles Darwin was an Anglican, sponsored by Anglicans to do his research. In fact, his chain of being was strictly Anglican. The thing he was using to sort of either prove or disprove his original hypothesis was born in Anglican thought. That was the whole reason that he discovered the theory of evolution.
Do you believe in evolution?
No.
The entire field, yes, I do.
No.
The entire field of genetics was sponsored by the church. Again, originally, and even the Catholic Church has even, again, come around because there were Catholic critics of genetics in the field of genetics, but they still then said, and the Catholic Church has still then come back and said that they do believe the field of genetics is canon in religion.
And to be fair, my understanding is that, like, as these discoveries were happening, right, like they were taken in as this is like God's revelation of like the nature of reality.
I mean, sometimes again, that's not
not sometimes.
I'm not arguing against you, Jeb. I'm not arguing against you. I'm not arguing against you. I'm just saying that like this was like the church didn't. These things that we look at in opposition now weren't necessarily looked at in opposition before, right? Our
No, not
political
always.
viewings of this was different. So yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes they were, and sometimes they weren't. My issue isn't how well the church receives them immediately afterwards. My argument was that the church was the reason that they came to be in the first place.
Okay.
And again, it's irrefutable in all of those cases. So
Okay. Sunday,
you can
go
keep
ahead.
saying no,
That's
but I'd
pretty
like
meaningless,
proof.
but okay, sure.
Sunday, go ahead with what? I was interjecting.
Well, you have this look on your face that looks like you wanted to say
Well,
something.
yeah, we've got Beavis and Butthead over here who think that the church sponsored all science, even
Tell me that I'm
based on
wrong.
writing.
You
Which
said
one's
no-
Beavis and
you
which one's
said-
Butthead?
Hold on. You
Doesn't
said
matter.
no to the Charles Darwin example. I would like to hear you tell me why that one was wrong. I'm
Because
demanding you tell me why.
Because Charles Darwin wasn't a Christian.
He was Anglican. He 100% was Anglican. That is just true. That is just the truth.
Was
Charles
he? You
Darwin
mean
was
he was
Anglican.
raised Anglican? Because
No,
that's not the
he
same
was
thing.
Anglican, and the chain of being that was the core of his hypothesis when he was researching all of this stuff was an Anglican chain of being. That's what he was challenging in the church. That's why the church got
He
mad at
was
him.
not an Anglican.
He was
He
Anglican.
he had no belief in the Christian God.
Oh
You're
my
wrong.
gosh.
Okay,
But
$5.
you're wrong.
Before we get past this,
Incidentally,
I do
hang
want
on.
to move past this.
Hang on.
thing,
No,
go
but
ahead.
the
Yeah,
notion
sorry.
the notion of genetic descent is not intrinsic to the idea of the great chain of being. The Christian church does not have a patent over the concept of a line. That's insane.
They don't have the patent on any of it, but they were the core.
Fondue,
No, they weren't.
Fondue for
thinkers
No, they
$5
weren't.
says
on the chain of being.
you're not
No,
going to
they
interrupt me
weren't.
making money. Okay, $5 for Fondue says if we weigh the socializing effect of religion to the
Wick.
prejudice that comes from it, do you think it would be net good or bad? Also,
Wick, have a
$20
question.
from No
Wick.
Step on Snake. Let me
Wick.
get my money, and then you can ask your question.
Have a question period at the end where you go through them.
That wouldn't be the worst idea.
Don't tell the man how to run his
Look,
show.
Yeah,
It's
just
your
Wick,
show,
man.
isn't
Do your
it?
thing.
Let
Make your money,
let me
Wick.
make my money. What differentiates religion from other non-supernatural ideologies to which people devote their lives? Or if it inspires enough devotion, do you also consider that a religion? And I want to
That's a good
move this
question, actually.
on from this science
Me too.
topic. I don't want to get bogged down on this for the entire discussion, but there's so much to religion. There's so much to how it plays into our lives that we could be discussing right now, and I really want to do that, right?
I
you
have
think
somewhere
that-
to take it, Wick, if you...
Well,
Go
let
ahead.
me try, and then if that fails, we can try yours. And this is a question to the panel as a whole, right? Do we think that someone who has a religious belief, however you want to define that, right, is more likely to be happier, healthier, and better for society? Or is it perhaps the opposite? Why or why not? What do we think? Does someone having a religion lead them to being a better person or more likely to be a better person? What do we think?
Those who know
No.
which gods they serve will fare better than those whose gods lie deep in their unconscious.
I think no, actually.
I think the understanding is that, and I don't have the studies, so don't ask me for the studies because I don't have them. But from what I've remembered on past discussions, that there are benefits in terms of health benefits and all that. But I think that's like tangential, right? Like there are people. I think maybe like religious people might like live longer or some shit like that, or report like a more happiness. But understand that comes in the context of a social setting, right? You get this club that you can be a part of and support systems that are extremely valuable and so far have not been replicated within the secular world, right? But that doesn't mean that religion imparts something that is uniquely special. It's simply that we just haven't developed these things. We didn't have to because we had religion, right? So there's no reason to develop a parallel track to have these benefits.
Yeah, and I agree with Prime 100%. I think it can make you a happier person. I don't know that it can make you a better person by
No,
default
definitely
that you're
not.
religious. Yeah.
Jeb Tam seemed to say yes, though, or not Jeb Tam. I'm sorry, PF Young. All the white guys look the same to me. Okay.
Thank you. That's fair.
I mean, yeah, it is.
So I'm just curious. I see your hand, Fairy Queen. We'll get to you next, right? But I'm curious to ask Young.
I think...
Elaborate.
Well, go ahead.
please.
Sorry,
Why?
ask a question.
Yeah. Why? Why do you think this? Why do you believe that those whose gods are known, right,
Mhm.
will serve better than those whose gods.
Hang on, you asked the
are
question to the
unidentified.
panel. Now we're diving into Jung's.
Well,
Well,
he's
I'm
only
the
one
most
that
interesting person
seems-
here. Let's
He's
just-
That
the
was the
only
most
one that
interesting
seems to
quote.
have the opinion that
Was it a
differs
Jordan
from the rest
Peterson
of
quote,
you.
by the way?
No, it's a P.F. Young quote on the
Okay,
spot.
my bad. Just curious.
I think that, like, the way I define religion is, those beliefs that are most deeply held. And that's one way to look at it. And the reason I think it's fair to
Wait,
use that
can
definition
anyone
as opposed
not
to...
have religion by that definition?
No. But let me make the case for why I
That's
think
why
that's a
it's
better way to
stupid.
look at it. Well, let me make the case why I think it's actually better to look at that way. I see no downside to defining religion in such a way that captures all form of psychological dogma, including political nationalism, whether or not it claims to be atheistic, including other forms of extreme
Well, you made the term
dogma.
redundant. It has no value now. You're just attaching like the cultural currency associated with the term, but it has no actual descriptive purpose.
Well, so for example, I would say a nationalist who dies for his country and kills other people over his beliefs is engaging in exactly the same kind of dogmatic behavior that a term like religious dogmatism is used to diagnose.
Except it's not used to diagnose that strictly. Religious dogmatism is used
Well,
colloquially sometimes for that.
And-
But more specifically, it's literally used to refer to actual written dogma.
What is the downside of defining religion in the way that you just admitted? You just said
Because if you
religion
make a
can be
term,
used
if
to
you make a
diagnose that
term,
level of fun-
because if you make a term mean everything, it means
it doesn't mean everything.
Literally,
I didn't say.
it
I'm a-
basically does. It has no descriptive value in terms of distinguishing between one social or intellectual or cultural formation from any number of others.
First off, I'm aware of syndrome. When everyone's super, no one is. Yes, if you use one word to mean everything, it means nothing. I didn't use religion in that way. Religious beliefs are those beliefs that underpin all other beliefs. That's a specific subset of belief. And what I just said about it's important to define religion that way because it better captures all forms of dogmatism that I think everyone on this panel agrees is worthy of diagnosing and addressing. Then I don't see a downside. What exactly is the
Well,
downside?
if I may.
What
Here's
does
the
that
question.
mean?
If I
Well, can I ask the question? Wick, this is my response, and I'll leave it there. What is the downside of defining religion in that way, other than, well, I don't really like it or I don't really disagree with
Sure.
it? It certainly
Well,
is not redundant
I'll
because
answer.
it's just,
I'll answer
Go ahead.
from my end, right? The downside to defining religious belief in such a way that it is a deeply held belief by someone is that means no one is not religious. It's a category. It spreads this category, I think, way too far. It expands it to in absurdum, right? We can imagine people who held deep, like, strong beliefs, but I would not consider those people religious.
Well, but
right?
Wick, it's not
What's the
absurd.
downside
It's
of
not absurd for everybody to be religious. The problem is that the nature of the panel is that we're asking whether religion is a force for good.
His
We're essentially, but
definition-
how he's construing it essentially makes the question: is an essential.
it's inescapable. What I said in my opening statement, you can't get away from religious traditions because they.
Yeah, you've
It's
defined your
inescapable.
way into success in the argument, which is stupid.
Okay.
That's
Fairy Queen,
stupid.
give us a go. Give it a go, Fairy.
I apologize. I forgot the original question that you asked, but I will
Everyone
respond
does,
to.
it's okay.
Jung's. I will respond, however, to what Jung said. You mentioned specifically nationalism. So you therefore, underneath your definition of a nationalist, would therefore be somebody who is religious. Is that what you're saying? I just want to clarify before I respond.
Well, there's different degrees of religiosity, obviously. There's Christers, right? People who say they're Christian but never go to church. The people that wear MAGA hats and live their entire lives around worshiping Donald Trump, pretty religious, in my opinion. More religious than most people who would call themselves Christians.
So here's the problem that I have, and I don't have the book with me on hand, but it's Benedict Anderson's book, which is about nationalism. There's a chapter in that book that specifically talks about the untombed soldier, and it talks about the reason why people are willing to die for their nations and why they're not willing to die for other groups, like, for instance, the Labor Party or for the Marxist Party. And the reason why Anderson gives why people are willing to die for their nation is because of disinterestedness. In other words, you do not get to choose, right? You do not get to choose the nation that you are born into or the nationality that you have. And so by virtue of that, people are more willing to sacrifice themselves for their nation than they might otherwise do for identities or dogmas that they elect to have.
Sure.
So
Just
the reason
so
why
just for clarification, I'm curious. So would you, instead of disinterestedness, would it be also correct to use people are more willing to die for immutable characteristics? Characteristics that they feel, at least,
yes, they
are
feel that are
immutable to
intrinsic-
themselves. They cannot change.
Yes.
There's no way out. I am this, and therefore I must stand, right, for
Correct.
this.
And,
Okay.
and that's one of the things that I hoped that we would get into with this panel, which is the danger of asking people to reinvest their identities into their religion, is that when you try to get people to believe that their religion is an immutable characteristic of themselves, right? It's not just a thing that I believe. It's not just a thing that I do on Sunday. It's who I am. I am Catholic and I will never not be Catholic, or I am Protestant and I will always be Protestant. Then you really do have people who are more willing to blow up cars, to shoot each other.
Then to your point, do you see the same danger when someone says not just feminism is what I believe, but I am a feminist? Do you feel that there's similar danger there? Why or why not?
Because it's not an immutable characteristic to be
but
a feminist.
Neither is nationalism, right? Neither is nationalism, but they believe it's to be true. They believe.
Exactly.
Okay, but people don't identify as feminists as a result of being indoctrinated. You are a feminist, and you will go to feminist church. It's not how that works.
No, but I mean, I think what Wick is trying
is particular to the social dynamics at play.
No, what Wick is trying to say is the danger she's pointing out is that religion teaches you that there is this one God, and so you will either follow him or you won't, and you'll be damned or you'll be saved. And then and then how that translates to nationalism is nationalism.
Well, that can't be true because that's not necessarily true of religions.
Stop.
You are subhumanly
the way
stupid.
that translates to nationalism, I think, is what she's saying is you are an American. You were born in America. You didn't choose to be, but you are one, so you can die for that. Feminism does a similar thing. Even if there's the exception of male feminists, but for female feminists, it is you are a woman. You have this struggle. You will never be able to escape this struggle, so your only choice is to fight this struggle or to be someone who acquiesces to this struggle. So it is a very similar thing along those lines.
I can't think of something Christ would hate more than somebody just making shit up with his slapping.
Bro, you have not had a single actual argument against what I've said this whole time.
You began this panel asserting that up until the 21st century, till the past 25 years, my dude.
Yes, I still agree with that, and you still haven't given an actual argument against it, other than no.
For those who have just come in,
I want to give Fairy Queen a chance to respond to these things because I asked her a question, and 𝕵𝖎𝖙 we've had a discussion about her question, but I want her to respond to the criticism or at least the question of her question. Fairy Queen, floor is yours. Go ahead. And I see you, Prime. I'll get you next.
All right. Sorry, Prime. I know I keep talking.
Oh, no problem.
Being a feminist is not an immutable characteristic. Being a woman or being a man might be an immutable characteristic, but being a feminist is something that you choose. It is a thought system that you get to choose, right? So that's not the same. So it's not an immutable characteristic. Neither is being a naturalist, neither is being a botanist or being a Marxist, right? That's one thing. And actually, Jeb, while I appreciate
being a Christian isn't either.
But that's sort of what I'm getting at. And that's one of the dangers of asking people to reinvest themselves in religion. Because there are examples in history of people like they don't just think of religion as something that they do on Sunday and then it's a part of them. It's often very much tied into their sense of national and ethnic identity. So a good example of this would be the Troubles in Ireland, right? So like, the story of Christopher Hitchens, he's pulled out of a car. Are you a Catholic or Protestant, right? And he said, I'm Jewish. Well, are you a Catholic, a Jewish atheist? Or are you a Protestant Jewish atheist? And that's not the only time that's happened. That has happened before in history. That happened during the English Civil War between Cromwell and Charles II.
Again, I'm sorry to interrupt, Fairy Queen, but again, maybe I'm miscommunicating, right? But I understand.
It's your fault, definitely.
It probably is, right? But I understand that feminism isn't really an immutable characteristic, but much in the same way, Christianity isn't really an immutable characteristic. You have pointed to plenty of examples where it becomes one, right? It becomes one. And so I'm asking the question, if we can use another ideology other than feminism if it makes you more comfortable, right? But do you not think that there is a problem or a risk, at the very least, of people swallowing their ideologies and then identifying as those ideologies, right? So not only do I just believe feminist things, but I am a feminist, right?
So I think that, so to answer your question, I think I'm going to piggyback off of what President Sunday says. So there's a difference. So yes, of course, there is a danger in that happening, right? And as President Sunday said, if there was a feminist church, right, where you were baptized into feminism, where you received your first communion, maybe it was in a little
They got an
pink dress.
example.
Do you not think there's rituals when it comes to ideologies, though, like that?
I'm sure that there are, but my point is simply that that particular kind of ritualistic indoctrination with thousands of years of history does not yet exist for feminism. When that does exist, maybe that's a conversation.
So $5 for fondue to say, Fairy, there
That'd
are
be fun.
people that will set a city on fire for their sports team.
Yeah, but that kind of goes
That's
to
religious. That's exactly what I'm talking
Yeah,
about.
and I think that goes, what you just said, Ferry, respectfully, kind of goes against your argument that the issue is the immutable characteristic part. Because what we're trying to say is, as a Christian, you're not ever, and Christian thought never says you are immutably a Christian. It says you are immutably a son or daughter of God. But Christianity is always willing in Christianity. Same with feminism. In feminism, you have the choice to be a feminist or not be a feminist. You don't have a choice to be a woman, and you don't have a choice to the existence of women or the plight of women. So in feminism and the ideology, you have a choice to be a feminist or not, but women are suffering, and if you're not a feminist, you are allowing them to suffer. If you are a feminist, you are fighting against their suffering. It is very similar to its
Yeah.
Are you suggesting? Hang on, wait.
Hold on,
Very quickly.
hold on. Yeah, hold on. I want to. It's my turn. So I think Jeb is right. About the struggle. I think he's like hitting the nail on the head. Specifically, like on this narrow question. Like you can't change. Well, okay. You can't change your sex.
We can use anti-racist as the same thing, right? Like you're born or like into your characteristics, but you can fight against it or acquiesce it. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, but hold on. I think I don't want to talk about that because I think it's a different conversation. No, but like I don't want to get the I want to focus on this one question. And not So anyway, so I think he's right about the struggle. And that like that is inherent, right? In the ideology, feminism ideology, teaches you that, teaches you the history, and lets you know that you can't really escape from this fight. So I'm with you on there. But there is an inscrutability of religion that feminism doesn't have. Right? Feminism is open screen. In fact, you can see it all the time, right? Like you see in these different waves of feminism, in which it's being rethought. Now, there's
Have you ever read the
thinking
Feminine
that happens
Mystique?
on. Yeah, let me finish. I promise, I'm almost done.
But Prime, you're as wrong as Jeb, just in the opposite direction. Like there are Christian scientists going back for centuries.
As soon as I'm done, and I promise I'm not going to take too long. I just need to get it out. All right. There's an inscrutability of religion.
That's what
now,
she said.
Religion does like examine itself, right? And there is some like evolution within its thought, but faith is a built-in protection mechanism, so that when there is discrepancies within the dogma, right? It says that like you are a better person, you are a better Christian, you are a better son of God or daughter of God if you don't examine these things, right? And the act of not examining it gets you closer to heaven. So like that, there is no such mechanism within feminism. There's no such mechanism in most of the ideologies. Maybe I can be proven wrong on that one, but I think most of the ideologies allow for a level of scrutability.
Sunday?
No. Christian philosophers going.
Sunday goes $10 for 𝕾𝖎𝖙 to say the panel is simply pointing out extreme behavior, which spans all religions, including atheism. I still have not heard a solid argument for religion being good or bad. Enjoy more money, Wick. I will. Sunday, go ahead.
Well, the initial question that you detracted us from, Wick, thank you very much, that was paid for, was ill-conceived. Whether or not religion makes people happier and better for society. These can be contrary to each other. Yeah. You can be happier and engaging in behaviors that are contrary to your society's interests. For example, we have a general lackadaisical and disinterested attitude towards things of the nature of climate change or of the control of globe-spanning pandemics and things of that sort, by people who will reassure themselves that this life is of no consequence on the basis of literally nothing except that their parents raised them to believe a certain book was an instruction manual written by God. That these, and on the flip side of this, taking these things seriously can have severely detrimental effects on your mental well-being. There are stresses in your world that somebody who is aloof to these things simply doesn't experience. Yet, by doing so, one is being more useful to their society by taking real threats to it and to their neighbors seriously. So
Yeah, I mean, but I agree. I agree with what he's saying, and I agree with the one issue I had what Prime Kai said is I think Christianity actually really encourages Christians to seek out knowledge but still have faith, right? They don't say don't question things. They say question but still have faith. It even says in part of the Bible, if Jesus' bones were found tomorrow, burn every Bible you've ever found. Like, it literally tells you to abandon the faith if the faith is proven wrong. It says that in the Bible. But on what President Sunday was saying is, like, there is not just a blind faith component there. It really
well, there
is
is for
like,
some people. That's not a universal statement.
yeah. But
So, for example, if you're talking about an Aquinas, sure. If you're
But
talking
what
about an
I'm saying is
Alfarabi, sure. If you're talking about like a
I get
Ken
it.
Ham, no. If you're talking about
No.
a you,
And that's what
definitely
I'm saying. Is I agree. Well, so you don't know that, but I
do.
was about
It's
to agree
manifest.
with exactly what you're saying. I agree. I agreed, and when I said pretty much exactly what President Sunday said in fewer words, it can make you a happier person. I don't think it by default makes you a good person, because that depends if you're following, and this is where religion becomes the greatest critique of religion. We think there's a right religion, obviously. I think if you're following the wrong religion, you can be happier, live a longer life, have an even happier, more fulfilling life, but you could still be doing things that are damaging.
Out of curiosity, and you don't have to answer, but
I'll answer any
are you
question,
religious?
Yeah. Very, yeah.
Which
I'm
religion?
Christian.
Christian. Young,
yeah.
are you religious? In which religion?
I'm Christian adjacent.
Christian adjacent.
Yeah, so
I want to go through Sunday. Christian or no?
I really want to touch on
religious.
the climate
Agnostic.
change thing.
How about Prime? Religious or no?
Absolutely not.
Absolute Fairy Queen. Religious or no?
I'm agnostic atheist.
Agnostic atheist and
Yeah.
Brutilities.
Atheist. Yeah.
Atheist.
Hey,
Yeah,
I just want to say very
hold on,
quickly
but
to
I really
respond
wanted
to that
touch on the
super
climate
chat.
change thing. I really wanted to touch on it.
Really?
Because the climate change thing, right? If you look at what non-Christians think Christians believe, or Christians that are Creaster Christians want to believe, climate change wouldn't matter because it's all about heaven. But I really wanted to challenge Fairy's whole thing about that. If you actually read the Bible, it says to be good stewards of what God gave you, and everything in the Bible aligns with the idea that you should take care of the planet that you're on. So you could absolutely be the most rabid climate change advocate.
It also says to give all that you have to the poor. Where's that getting us? Where's that happening?
Oh, that was
exactly?
a specific instruction to a specific
Hold on,
person.
stop. He directly challenged me.
I did.
Yeah, but did you tell me to stop? I hope you didn't.
No, I told Prime to stop because he was about to cut in on me. But he literally challenged me. The most charitable populations in the developed Western world, where people have routinely the money to be charitable, are the religious populations. That's
okay.
Why do they?
Okay, we got the point. We got the point. We got to get more people in. I want Prime, then Brutilities, then Fairy Queen. Sorry.
It's very quickly. I just want to respond to that super chat. Like, and I think, I mean, they're right in that, like, we're just like bouncing evidence buffer. And I think Jeb Tan actually addressed this at the very beginning. And that, like, well, I'm going to say this is a bad thing, and he's going to say, well, here's a good thing, right? And that, like, if this discussion is simply whether religion is good or bad, well, like, it's all discussion over, because it's both of those things, obviously, right? We should be focusing on maybe whether we should have it or whether we should move past it, whether its usefulness is
or maybe how many pedophiles in the Catholic Church.
Simply whether it's good or bad. Yeah. Go ahead.
Whether everyone's religious or not.
Yeah.
Brutilities.
Oh, honestly, which question at this point?
Okay, Fairy Queen then. Go ahead.
Okay. I'd like to respond to two things from Jeb, and then I'd like to respond to the original question, which I feel is way behind us, which is whether or not religion can make you a better person, or whether or not it can make you happy or a better person.
Not can, tends to, right?
It?
Whether it is more likely to than not having.
Okay, my apologies. Jeb, I have two responses. One of them is to your quote about the stewards of the earth. Remember the quote that I gave you. The quote that I gave you, the point of that isn't that the bomb is going to come and destroy the mountains and the fields will be burned and the cattle will be destroyed along the fields. The point is the people will be dead, right? The point is why should we care, like in our present moment, if we happen to die for a cause that we believe in, if we wind up simply having to go to heaven a little bit sooner? That was the point. The point is not really adjacent to environmentalism. It
No,
has
I
to
was
do with,
responding
like,
to President Sunday there because he mentioned like a climate change thing, like why protect the planet from climate change if the next life is better than that. That wasn't a direct response to you. It was just like a similar theme to what you were saying. But I agree that it wasn't a response to what you said.
Okay, fair enough. The second thing has to do with your point about sports teams. So again, as I say, already stated before, yes, it doesn't necessarily just have to. An immutable characteristic can be indoctrinated into different ideologies. And yes, that can even apply to sports teams. In fact, I'm a little surprised at the example, right? Think about most of us know, like you grow up watching sports teams. Like I'm sure many of you played sports when you were little. You had a sports shirt, right? You
Maybe
probably
this will help. Maybe this will
football
help the
games,
discussion
right?
if I ask you
Play
this,
League of
Fairy Queen.
Legends.
Fairy Queen, this is to you, right? So you can continue
Okay.
answering. You can think. What's the differentiating factor between an ideology and a religion? Like, is there a difference, and what is that?
I mean, the standard that I'm using to define a religion is the standard given by the IRS. And I know that that's perhaps a little cheap, but I mean, it's the standard. We have our local Scientologist here. I'm sure our Scientologist will appreciate me using this definition. Let's see if I can pull it up. My apologies, it's somewhere. Okay, so to define churches and other religious entities, some of the IRS guidelines consider whether or not an institution has.
It doesn't define it.
It doesn't define it.
It
I have
doesn't-
all these
doesn't define
tenets here. I have these tenets, a distinct legal.
Okay, I'm
existing-
asking how you define it, Fairy Queen. If I were to say, like, you seem to take umbrage when I suggested that feminism might be religious in nature, right? What's the difference? Why is feminism not a religion? What makes it not a religion?
Well, first of all, I don't take any umbrage that it could be religious or that it might become religious. The reason I say that it is not religious is because it is not indoctrinated into the majority of people's childhoods from an early age. There are
Well,
not
it could be.
rituals associated with feminism into the same degree as either of these two
Well,
examples.
that could be
not
true with
religion.
major religions, right? But a budding religion, right? Well, first of all, I guess I'll ask this: does a religion have a floor? Do you have to have a certain amount of believers to have a religion?
If I can jump in here, that's a sociological question. I think a better question would be, what about, for example, non-denominational families that don't engage in any kind of ritual, maybe even don't even go to church regularly, but nonetheless have sort of a loose belief in God, maybe keep a Bible in the house, stuff like that, and still identify as Christian. They might have less ritual and less social reinforcement than a feminist in a university might. Like that's true. The threshold can't simply be the absence or the presence of ritual or reinforcement mechanisms. Those dominate our life in many different domains.
And with that, Fairy, continue to answer my question, if you would.
That's a fair point, but I think the key part that you mentioned there was university, right? So the two institutions that we mentioned,
That's just
sports
one
and
instance.
religion.
Medicine
that's
is another. Yeah.
So, what do you mean in terms of medicine? You mean you go to the doctor's office since you were very young? Is that what you mean? We engage with the medical system since we're children?
Medical ethics, enforced behavioral norms within the building, things of that sort. Certain attitudes towards certain contemporary understandings of different medical procedures, sanitation, things like that. Like these are the same. We treat them as if they're of a different category, but fundamentally the reinforcement mechanisms are identical.
Again, I know it's not satisfactory, but I go by the IRS's definition.
But it doesn't have a definition.
When in
They have
doubt-
several things. They have several things.
Go with the IRS's.
No,
definition.
it literally doesn't. What they have are a
not?
few things that are
I have something to say,
associated
Wick.
are associated with a religion. It does not say a religion
Young,
is X.
maybe Jung can help me out. Oh God, this might be a mistake. What is the difference, right, between an ideology and a religion?
An ideology, well, a religion is a grand narrative that encapsulates all the fundamental aspects of the human condition, whereas an ideology only pushes one. For example, let me give you an example. Christianity, and many other religions, the major ones, all have variations of the archetypes of good versus evil, the Father, the Son, transcendence of death, miracles, all this different stuff that's present in all religions, right? The smallest
present in all
tribe,
religions.
the smallest, it's absolutely the case that every human society known to man ever, across time and across the globe, have fundamentally similar patterns in the narratives they tell. That's the
Well, that's
archetypes.
wrong.
That's
That's
absolutely, That is
That's
Joseph Campbell 101.
I know. Joseph
President
Campbell is not
Sunday,
respected in sociology for a
if
reason.
what
were
you
woefully
said
mistaken.
was a
Oh, well, if he's
function
not
of how,
respected in sociology,
if what
then-
you said,
He's not
Mr.
respected in
Sunday,
anthropology.
Mr. President,
He's not even
Mr.
respected in
President,
lit theory. He's
if
not
what
taken
you
seriously.
said was a function of how
Although you're a
confidently
Jordan
you sounded
Peterson
when
stan,
you
so I
asserted
suppose
it,
that's about,
I believe
consistent.
most of what you said. But alas, what you say is incorrect. As I was saying my point, if you, again, do any sort of cross comparison
That
in
was
terms of
underwhelming.
religion and narratives, thank you, appreciate it. You'll see extremely common themes. No one disputes this. No one of any credibility who isn't a president of their own fairy tale domain would dispute.
But you
and so
literally
what-
would. If you, for
let me finish
example,
my
look
point.
at
Okay,
if you,
enough.
for example, look
Okay.
at critics of Mesopotamian religion,
Just because
If
he's the
you look at
president of his own
anthropology-
Yeah,
domain
you
doesn't mean
got
he's the
okay.
president of this
President
domain.
with the dictatorship is gonna have to mute you if you don't let him finish his point. Young
Silence is
hasn't
free
gotten
speech.
a lot of speak. Young,
What-
finish your
the
point,
difference
then
between
they can
religion-
respond. Yeah.
Ideology, for example, like let's say MAGAism or the Make America Great movement. They just say America's good no matter what. There's no such thing as a bad thing that America can do. That tells one side of the story. That yes, society and culture does do good things, obviously, but the entire story is that there is both good and bad things. That's the whole story of Osiris and Horus in Egypt. Osiris is the decrepit king, and Horus comes back and
you literally did
rejuvenates
just read
society.
Peterson, didn't you?
So no, I read anyone who's informed about comparative religion, Mr. Sunday. And please,
Well, clearly not. Do you know who
your
Hick is?
backhanded dismissals are not winning you points.
Do you know
Jung.
who Hick is? Do you know who
So what? So I think the more relevant point
Kavanaugh.
that you're asking about, Wick, is like ideology. Okay, like the sports team thing. Like, do people who are really big sports fans go out and kill other people of different sports teams?
Sometimes, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I would, and okay, this is my point, and I'd like to, if maybe the last topic we can get into is ethics, the religious underpinning of ethics that we can get into. But I would say that's a perfect example. I know people are like, well, you're defining religion in a very weird way. Sure. Conservatives say that about defining women in a very weird way. I don't think that alone is an argument against it. I think if you point to the fact and say, oh, wow, there's people do kill each other over sports. These people are arguably more religious and more dogmatic than 95% of people who go to church every Sunday, because those people aren't willing to kill anyone over their beliefs. So I think religion as being the fundamental belief system, I think that's a psychological truism.
Okay.
And religious stories that have survived the test of time are those that have those archetypal patterns that are found universally cross-culturally.
Brutilities.
Well, except they don't, because most of the
Except they do.
Mesopotamian ones are all
Except they do.
dead.
I see.
No,
I
they
see you, Jeff
don't.
10. I promise, but we gotta get to
That's
other
true.
people. We gotta get to
One
other people.
fact.
You guys
One
have-
fact
you guys
that
have
President
all
That's
had a
literally
lot of
the
time.
only
so
word I
far.
have to say for this question. That is the answer. That's the answer. So you don't
Okay.
need to come to. You don't need to go to me.
Brutilities,
That's my
go.
word answer.
Jung, real quick. Didn't
Whoa!
you just say earlier
It's
that-
Jung, you racist piece of God's divine soul.
Yeah, maybe I am. Okay, cool. So,
ahead.
fucking, you just said earlier that MAGA itself is a religion, but now
Fucking
you're
who?
pointing to it as an ideology. I'm curious why you just did that.
MAGA people engage in religious behavior. It's extremely
Yes.
dogmatic. And in ideology, more
Yeah.
accurately, would be a parasite on a religious substructure. That's the complex version that obviously we can smoke a lot of weed
yeah,
and talk
hard
about.
disagree. So all you're talking
Ideology-
about is fanaticism. Fanaticism
Well,
and
sure,
religious,
but that's-
religiosity, completely different, right?
No,
Religion
identical.
needs-
Identical.
No. One main
Mm-hmm.
factor is supernatural or spirituality, right?
Why?
One of those two things has to be included. Okay.
When people say politics is a religion, do you not understand what they mean?
It's an ideology, yes.
When people say politics is like a religion,
Yeah, I understand what they mean.
and the
but then I
reason you
would
understand
disagree.
that is because you accept the
Is
definition
because
I
they
put
both have fundamental belief systems. Wow, yeah, okay.
Well, no.
Except
Understanding an
religion also
erroneous
has-
conception does not mean you're signing off on it.
Politics is a
also-
religion is an erroneous conception.
Brutilities,
Politics
go.
isn't religious,
Stop,
though.
stop
Yes, it
interrupting
is. Very
Brutilities.
erroneous.
Brutilities hasn't had a lot of time, so we're gonna give Brutilities some uninterrupted time. Young, you complained when the president interrupted
No,
you.
no, it-
Do not interrupt Brutilities.
No,
I've never
I'm
complained
interrogating
in my
a little bit.
life.
It's okay. But no. So, ideology and religion are very similar. Okay.
I
But
agree.
if we're using them differently, they have to have a difference. Okay. When you say religion is fundamental beliefs, underpinnings, etc., you're talking about
Mm-hmm.
ideology. Okay.
Sure.
So religion needs something else. That something else is the
Yes,
spiritual,
so
the supernatural, etc.
I will give
That's
one more.
backwards,
I'll
Jack.
give one honest answer, and then I'll move it on. The honest answer. You're asking a very good question. The difference between an ideology and an archetype,
I'm telling
or
you what it is. Yes.
an ideology and a religious story. The honest answer is, I am not smart enough to communicate in this panel format where there's a lot of entertaining discussion going on. The nuanced differences between a comprehensive religious story, which encapsulates all 6 archetypes, that would be my definition, which again, we could take 20 minutes to expand on, and an ideology which is only a some combination of those archetypes. That's the
Okay.
definition that I'd be happy to expand on any one of you one-on-one in an extended conversation over a nice joint and whiskey, perhaps.
Nice. That's great. Real quick though.
Did you
You're
just
talking
point to
about-
Fairy
you're-
that she's a dweeb?
No.
I mean-
Oh, wait. It's reversed on your end.
It's different on
Oh,
everyone's.
wow.
That's
That's
why I
so
wrote it.
fucked
You
up.
fucked up.
That's
Yeah.
why
Okay.
I wrote it
Pick him,
backwards.
pick him.
Yes.
Ban
fine.
him!
Yeah.
Okay.
But anyways, no. So what you're referring to is like Jordan Peterson's like hierarchical value structure thing, where like we all try to achieve the divine, and what he promotes as divine or God is just like fictional narratives throughout history. Okay, that's what you're talking about. The only issue with that entire
Am I?
belief system is that it's cyclical in nature. It's just a circular reasoning. Because if you
Tautological.
reach
maybe.
towards the divine as God, and then you say God as well, it's the structural underpinnings, the metaphorical substrate, as he loves to say, of fiction, as it is, the human condition, etc. You're just relating it back to itself infinitely, because there is no value there. You're just defining repeatedly, right? So it can't be that. That just isn't satisfactory, which is why I say it has to point to supernatural, spiritual, one of the two, something outside of yourself that isn't relating back into the real world. That's ridiculous.
I disagree, but I'll let someone else go.
Very quick.
Um,
Oh, Prime, I see it. But
yeah,
let's
you're
get-
killing me.
I love Prime go first. Prime, you got
Yeah, Prime, you've been done.
Hand up forever, Wick. Racism in action.
This is just
Um,
revenge, but go on.
Fair enough.
I
All
haven't
right, I'll give you-
forgotten. I haven't forgotten sitting there. I watched the 𝕵𝖎𝖎 fascist panel with 𝕵𝖎 and Destiny, and I sat there for an hour with my hand up like a schoolgirl, right, waiting to be called on by the teacher.
Yeah,
with
well,
some
when you're as important as 𝕵𝖎 or Destiny,
banger
I'll call on you
quotes,
fucking more. Okay, any which way.
Prime, go ahead.
But fair enough. All right. Yeah. So all of the answers to Wick's very difficult question have been pretty piss poor. And this comes at I'm looking at PF, who I like, and Fairy Queen, who seems very lovely. But yeah, piss poor definitions. I'm gonna give you the best and the worst answer to this.
Okay.
Ideology and religion fall on the spectrum. A spectrum that consists of different amounts of. I said it's the worst. I said that. I called it. You can't take my
Okay,
answer.
well,
Don't copy me. Anyway, so it's like this along this spectrum is like different amounts of the ability to like scrutinize the ideology / religion, right? This thing, the ability to I guess it's willingness to incorporate outside ideas, right? Like it's I think it's kind of pointless to try to figure out like what is the dividing line here, because there is no dividing line. This is on a spectrum, and
Certainly
we will never.
We don't have to have an exact line, but certainly we can
It's
get
pointless to
close.
determine whether or not it's a spectrum because it's on a spectrum. That's what that reasoning amounts to.
We're all
It's
on a
the hunt.
spectrum.
I'm saying that like this
I feel like I'm on the
conversation was just
spectrum.
going to go on forever because there's going to be an infinite
agree.
amount of gray here, and so like we
Well,
can just, like,
that's
move on
not
to
true
the next.
though. There's
Okay,
there believe it or
President. You can respond when I'm done, right? And I'm almost done.
Mr. President.
So fair enough. Okay,
True,
I
fair.
apologize.
Sunday's
Um,
fine.
But yeah, like so I'm gonna try to move this conversation on, but you guys can ignore me if you like. So I think we should talk about like how what would look like in a post-religion world. I think
Agreed.
what we're seeing is that transition happening now, and we're seeing the consequences of not having the infrastructure that I referred to much earlier to in place for people. So levels of church attendance or religious attendance in general is falling, right? People's faith is being eroded, or at the very least, they're not picking it up in the first place. And so what they replace that with right now, unfortunately, is a lot of conspiracy theories, where that gives them that sense of purpose. It gives them those social underpinnings, right? That they used to have from religion, and it's been completely hollowed out. Now, I think this journey is worth it, but I think it's going to be extremely painful, especially if we don't have any sort of concerted effort to do these things, to replace these things.
So to be clear,
like
Prime,
whether
to be clear, you are advocating for moving away from religion
Yeah.
towards secularism.
Oh my,
That is what you are
impossible.
Well, or
advocating.
That's impossible.
or humanism or whatever. Yeah.
Non-religion thinking.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm curious to get a read
I-
of the panel, right?
I'd
Who
like to
here's
say
with
something.
him? Who wants to
No.
move towards secular? So
Cringe
yeah, let's go.
secular
One-
humanism.
One
watch the hands
ally, Fairy
flip
Queen.
at-
You're not on board to the non-religion train. You don't wanna move to a world with that's free of religion, as you understand it.
Were you
Be
addressing?
specific.
Yeah, you Fairy Queen, because you're on that side, right? I'm curious if not, if you want to keep religion, I'm curious why.
I think I've already stated people are entitled to believe and to find comfort in whatever belief system they like. The problem with encouraging people to reinvest their identities, as I've stated before, is when it becomes mixed up in our legal system, when it becomes mixed up in our laws and in our schools, in the ways, and when it becomes mixed up as like with the AIDS crisis, with like how we handle public
But
health
as long as it
problems.
exists, it will. Right? As long as people, right,
Yeah.
have these religious beliefs, and as long as we have a democracy, right, as long as they're voting based on their moral systems, which are derived from religious beliefs that they hold, how can it not continuously be mixed up in our legislation? How can it not?
Especially when you
can-
agree with how pernicious it is, right?
Yeah. So I'm just curious.
Well, I
Perniciousness is the problem.
Yeah.
the perniciousness is the problem, but I think that the best way to handle that is through like exactly what we're doing now, through education, through informing people about religion, teaching people the real history of what religion actually is like. I think one of the problems, and this is a critique I would have of a lot of religions, is that the way that a lot of churches and a lot of religious institutions teach about the history of their faith is actually often very different than what the real history of the faith actually entails. So the history of like Catholicism at the Catholic Church is a pretty good example of that, right? So a lot of people mention, for instance, the Council of Nicaea being an example of like a moral axiom being encoded into law. But if you actually look at the historical story of Constantine, you'll see that he changed his mind depending upon which bishop he was in favor of during the time, right? We do see a lot of political influence like within the church, even from its earliest days. And a lot of things that a lot of people think are really set in stone in the church and have always been there, in fact, have been arguments that have been going on for centuries. So Jung, for instance, mentioned slavery. It just happens to be the case, like during the American Civil War, a group of the Confederacy went all the way over to Rome to ask the Pope to give his opinion upon slavery. Because up until that point, there had been numerous papal bulls stating that unjust slavery was the type of slavery that was outlawed. But unjust slavery was wrong, but slavery could still be used as a punishment underneath the Catholic Church. It took years of argument within the church before it actually came out and outright condemned the Catholic Church. But not the Catholic Church, but came right out and condemned slavery. So I'm sorry.
Yeah, I don't know if this panel is educating us, but it's definitely making me more and more believe that there is a hell, and perhaps we are in it. I want to toss it over to Sunday. Go ahead.
There's an extensive literature that actually tries to break down what it is that's a religion, what it is that that category entails, and how it's transformed over the last 2,000 years. To say that we can't argue about this is absurd and betrays just total ignorance of the field, and I think it's exceptionally arrogant to make that kind of claim when you've clearly done no research into it whatsoever. And not only that, but it's also undermining the work of people who are actually bothering to know. I actually resent that quite a bit, Prime.
Okay.
Well, define it for me then, Sunday. I asked the question,
That
what is
hard
the
a
difference?
stance on it.
I'll
No,
just
I'm
wait in-
serious. No,
Okay.
Sunday, what is the difference? And I'll ask the question again. What is the difference fundamentally between an ideology and a religion?
Depends
In your
on
opinion.
whose definition of ideology you're using.
Use
but if you're using the
yours.
liberal definition of ideology.
Use
Well, no,
yours.
because I don't make shit up on the fly. So what I'm telling you as I'm answering you is that
He makes it
there
up
are,
beforehand.
there are several principal uses of that term, so it depends on who you're talking about. As we're using ideology here, we're talking about it in a liberal sense, in which case it's essentially like your character sheet. You understand an ideology as like these different plugins that a person has that sort of determine their values and what they do in the world. This is their god, or this is their ultimate concern, or something like that. This is their ethical system. This is like their preferred culture. Things of that sort. When we're talking about religion, we often also do practically treat religions, quote unquote, in a similar fashion, but that's largely because of the way in which religions interface in a secular society with the state. wherein its proper place is understood to be within the same domain of opinions concerning the aforementioned. But when we look historically at the way in which the term is used, as well as when we look abroad from Western Europe and North America, less and less so, as increasingly different cultural groups have to accommodate that definition in order to be recognized by international law, we see things that we would class sort of colloquially as religious in the West, actually crossing these lines quite readily. It was noted by anthropologists studying
So it's a
India.
spectrum. Okay, whatever. It's a
Excuse
long
me?
time, literally a long time to say it's a spectrum. Like that's
Well,
literally
no, but
all you're
I'm
doing.
not saying it's a
That's
spectrum.
yeah,
But I'm really
literally,
not saying it's a
that's
spectrum.
that's the result of what you're
No,
saying.
what I'm saying
That
is
these
no. What
things
I'm
can-
saying is that the term as a universal category is inept. It doesn't do the work that it's.
Okay.
All terms
Yeah,
are universal
sure.
categories.
Okay.
are
Whatever.
Okay.
inept, I'm
Okay.
sure.
Okay. Before you go,
No,
Jim,
not
can I
all
ask
terms
you-
are universal
before-
That's
categories.
fine.
Before you
Yeah,
go,
yep.
$5 for Fondu to say, and this is a good question. I'd pose it to the panel actually. If we understand that states often do terrible things, do we agree to either abolish the state, or can we update the concept to be useful as an institution? So as it pertains
that to do
to
with the panel?
religion, to those of
think-
you
yeah.
who want to abolish religion or to move away to a more secular
Ooh.
religion, do you not think that perhaps we could instead update religious institutions to no longer have the flaws?
No, the
Okay.
question was
No.
good the way that it was. The question was good because it was relating the state to religion in the sense that everything people have been saying about
Well,
religion
it's
is
treating it
also
as a
true.
discrete social
Well, no,
entity like a state, which is dumb.
It's not.
Well, no.
It
It's
is.
it's relating the similarities of a state to a religious institution, which is that a lot of people who are pro-state do look at the state as above reproach, and that state interests are human interests at their core, and how socialism means workers own the means of production when really it means the
No,
state
that's
owns
not
the means of
socialism. It's
production
actually
and
explicitly
assumes that the
fascism.
state
That's incorrect.
Literally
represents
within a
workers' interests.
democratic republic, we have the mechanisms to scrutinize the state and to change it, right? Like within the hands
Yes.
of the people.
And like I said, the church
and-
has scrutinized and changed the church many times throughout history. Several times. It
Yeah,
is
except
so
except
popular
when it's
to
like
do so.
literally been proven wrong,
this
right?
is
Like, so
also just
we have an amendment system that says, hey, like before, like slavery was cool, right? We had it in the Constitution, right? And that's
Yeah.
great. But then we have the system that says, oh, we were completely wrong, and so we'll change this. Like
No, we
the
don't.
core
Hold on. No, we
concept-
don't. We don't have
the-
that. We don't have that at all.
Okay, whatever. So the core concepts, of religion, right? Like are static. Like you could
Not
the
true.
peripherals can
they're
change.
not.
The peripherals can change all the time, but like the core concepts of like any particular religion tend to be sticky and
No,
tend
they
to not
don't.
disappear.
Okay,
right? Like
absolutely.
No, I get
Yeah,
that
it's
what
not
you're
true.
saying.
Can you
Yeah.
give me an example? No, for those of you who are denying that it's sticky, can you give me an example where a core concept of religion has changed?
No, I agree with his updated verbiage. At first, he said the core concepts
Okay,
of
Sunday?
religion. I disagreed with
Sure.
that, but
Sunday, do
a
you still
religion,
disagree
yeah.
with that? That can you give me an example at least of where a
Well,
core
even
concept of a
like
specific
strictly.
religion has changed?
Am I muted still? What's happening?
No, you're here.
You were just
No,
talking
you're
over me.
Unfortunately, not.
I
Well,
can.
'cause he's
I
a
can give one.
moderator.
Thank you. Well,
You're
I
welcome.
even within Christianity, like the notion of what is the church has changed radically. Not even at the Reformation, but leading up to it as well. It changes constantly. It has
Sure.
actually not remained static for really any length of time.
Within a denomination, right, that believes that Jesus is the Son of God, is Jesus still the Son
Well,
of God? within
even
those
after the
denominations?
Reformation, Prime, like those denominations, that separate church split.
Oh, it's split.
Myriad
Oh,
ways.
it's split.
No,
Great.
that's what he's
So,
saying. Yeah.
within the
Wait,
denomination, right? Within
But
that
but the denominations
that believes
also
that Jesus
change
is the Son
radically.
of God. Does
No.
it change? Yes.
But
it can
what
split.
even
You can
what
have,
even
disagreements.
what even is meant, Prime?
split.
What is even meant by Son of God and Christ and things like that? Changes
Yeah, what
radically.
is it, right?
No,
And we
you
have
don't-
these religious
No,
debates
no,
all the
no,
time. But like, I'm saying that within a denomination, it goes on, right? These core concepts stay, but people can't
You
disagree
mean
with
the
them.
words do, sure, but the concepts.
hold on.
those
The
We need
change.
to.
Okay.
Hold on.
Stop.
I think we needed to define
Stop.
core concepts,
Stop.
right?
No.
Stop.
Hold on.
No, we don't need to define the word concept. Please,
do,
for the love of
actually.
No,
God.
core
actually.
concepts.
Okay, so yeah, core concepts, sure. So again, I think to maybe translate for Sunday here, right? What they are saying, as I understand it, is that when the core concept comes into question, it splits and becomes two separate denominations, right? And though we use the term religion very, very loosely, and the term Christianity even very, very loosely, even in the word Christianity, right? Or even under the umbrella of Christianity, I would argue that there are thousands of hundreds at least of denominations, all with a different answer to what do you mean by Jesus is the Son of God? Like, what do you mean by that? Like Trinitarianism versus non-Trinitarianism, right?
Yeah,
like that's
the
a
fact
big
that it's-
divide, right?
the fact
Mormons
that it's-
broke off because they did not believe, right, in the core concepts of
Okay, so
Christianity.
what's sticky or static?
Well-
I'm not following.
Well,
the
so what
sticky or
we're saying
static
is,
thing would be the
if
core
it's-
concept of the belief in monotheism, right? I would consider that a core concept of well,
Yeah,
look
but
at
even that's
Catholicism.
shifted.
No,
Yeah.
it's not.
Yes, it has.
How
It
many
has
diff-
no, because
no,
if
it
it
has.
necessitates.
Wait,
Hold
wait,
on,
wait. If I may,
please let me
please.
explain.
My
If it
dude,
necessitates- If it necessitates a splitting of denominations and the creation of a new church, that suggests that one, it is a core concept, and two, that it is generally static because the
Well,
original
no,
church
because
did not
if
want
it's-
to move off of it, so you had to create a new one in order to have that as a
You're
core
very
tenet of your
excited.
religion.
So
Okay, well, is
Yes,
the
no, I'm
Trinity a
loud.
core
I think
concept
on
to you?
the
Rick, I would like
subject
to
of
move the subject on.
I don't care. So on as far as like
Well, I
even
said it to Wick,
monotheism,
not you, Mr. President.
even monotheism being sticky, the appellations to God in the Old Testament are sometimes plural. Like you're just mistaken. I'm sorry. He's muted. Wick or Jeb.
Oh,
You're
he's not
not-
muted.
The
I didn't mean him.
The Trinity is not a pushing against of monotheism. It is a push. It is a
Well, according to
different
you, but that's
interpretation
not
of what Jesus
there's not
was.
agreement on that. That's
There is agreement on that. No one is
No,
in
there
disagreement in
isn't.
the Christian church that the Christian church is a polytheistic religion. I would challenge you to push and find a major denomination in the Christian church that considers Christianity polytheistic. Please find it. Tell me right now.
Let's be more specific. You can't
No,
find
they said monotheism.
we're talking about
a Catholic who believes
talking
that
We didn't say
Catholics are
polytheism.
we're talking about the staticness. Well,
Okay,
and
but-
Mormons
but
for that
I
matter.
think
But we're
that
talking
I-
about the staticness.
We're getting
Yes.
caught. We're getting caught
Agreed.
in this
If you
trap.
have to, if
But
you
I'm really
generally,
trying to
black
answer,
hole
Wick, and you
discourse,
keep
unfortunately.
if
No, I
it
can-
generally
black hole
necessitates
of-
a new
I
can
church to
unblack
be
hole
made, it
this.
is
And I want to
static.
get us out. I want to escape this.
Okay, but Wick, before we get out though, maybe you want to check chat quickly. Maybe somebody shot you $2 to say the R slur or something.
Okay, come on.
No, okay. If you
I have a question that could move us on. If I
try,
may ask.
please save us, Fairy Queen. You
It's
will
not
be
even
our
a
new
question,
savior. Go ahead.
Not even a question. It's just more of an observation about like the usefulness and maybe a reason why it's important to try to conscientiously move away from religious thinking. So one thing that I noticed is that I was raised Catholic, and I've mentioned like the term Catholic atheist versus Protestant atheist. When I meet another atheist who comes from a Protestant background, I can immediately tell that they can come from a Protestant background. And the reason why is that when I speak to somebody, like there's a way that it's not just about the facts of the religion that you learn. It's about the methodology that you inherit from that religion that influences the way that you look at a text, right? So if you're somebody that comes from a Protestant religion, I can't think of the denomination, you probably care a lot about the literal truth of the Bible. You're probably going to care really a lot about reading it in its original translation. You're going to care about like the original Greek word, the original word in Hebrew. And if you're a Protestant atheist, you're probably going to be somebody who's deeply, deeply invested in proving that each and every literal fact is like in fact false. So this is the Ken Ham versus the Bill Nye debate. But then like if I speak to somebody who's more like myself, who's a Catholic atheist, we don't usually talk so much about the literal truth of the Bible. We don't really talk about the Greek and Hebrew language. We don't really worry about like the exact meaning of the word. We usually talk about the traditions of the church. We talk about, pedophilia in the Catholic Church has been mentioned, right? We talk about whether or not women can become priests. We talk about like the legacy and the history and the traditions, right? And the rituals, right?
Yeah,
And so
manifestations and such.
Exactly. But the problem is that when you're not aware of the fact that that is influencing the way that you're looking at a text, right? You're not, you necessarily become blind to the way that you could otherwise interpret a text, right? So
Yeah.
for me, because that's the way I was raised, I might not necessarily look so much about, like, I didn't necessarily care about reading it in its original translation or looking at the original definition of a word, right? And why that might be important. Whereas somebody else, right, who comes from a more Protestant tradition, that person might not necessarily care so much about the author's like background, the tradition of the novel, right? The metaphorical or the lyrical sense of that, of what that book is supposed
Let me ask you, Fairy Queen, how will getting away from religious thinking help us with this problem?
It's not so much that you can escape, because it's that type of thinking has influenced so much of like literary interpretation of texts. It's more that when you are aware of the fact that that is what is influencing the way that you are reading the book, you can conscientiously change that, and you can choose to try a different avenue of interpretation, right? So if I know, for instance, that that's how I'm biased towards when I'm picking up and reading a text, I can change the way that I approach that text, and therefore maybe gain a more complete understanding.
Can you not do that while retaining your religion? Like, I know that there are people who are very religious currently and practicing religion who are very capable of saying, well, I know this is my interpretation based on my experiences and backgrounds, but I'm going to withhold that and try to as best I can, set aside my biases to interpret this problem or text.
Yeah, they're enlightened. Basically what she's saying. These people have already enlightened.
$2 from No Step on Snake.
Amen.
Just for Professor Sunday. Wick.
President Sunday.
Okay, there you go.
That's just Sunday. Hey, Wick, can I ask a question that's relevant to this and maybe get to a bottom issue
after
here?
I say $5, you are correct. Wick, you are a saint. Thank you. Okay, go ahead.
So
Go.
on this whole question of interpretation, this is what the first points I brought up. I like to pose a question for the panel. My contention is that because religion is a fundamental aspect of psychology, and actually what Fairy Queen was saying about it being at the
It's not
fundamental
a
base of all
fundamental aspect
literary
of psychology.
interpretation.
That's also wrong. Well done.
My claim is that you cannot argue for a moral system that we would all find, I don't know, valid or reasonable, without making appeals to faith claims, without making appeals to what are fundamentally religious, irrational
Give us an
claims.
example of that, please.
Here's the question for the panel. Can someone explain to me why slavery is wrong without invoking a faith claim at some point in their argument or at their premise?
Violates the dignity of other human beings who are your equals.
Why are human
in a democratic
beings...
culture, it's against the spirit of a democracy in which your capacity to be personed within an assembly of your fellow human beings is an inviolable condition of that democracy surviving.
Okay, so why is that? Democracy could be the wrong frame. That could be the wrong. So why is it wrong? Why is slavery wrong fundamentally?
Objectively, morally.
Well, I mean, according to the Bible, it's not fundamentally wrong. So there isn't necessarily a symmetry here. This will be wrong.
Well,
in accordance
according
with
to certain interpretations of it, the overwhelming majority of modern Christian interpretation would absolutely say slavery was wrong. Most of the people who abolished slavery were Christian.
It's immaterial.
And most
immaterial.
That's fundamental, not immaterial.
It's actually entirely immaterial.
It's entirely fundamental.
No, that's immaterial.
That's a humanist development.
Not immaterial.
That's a humanist.
This is a evade of my question. This is an evade.
That's a humanist That's a humanist development later on.
I will ask this again.
That's immaterial. That's a sociological question. There's actually nothing within the writ of the text or within Christian doctrine.
Mr. President, another plane.
That's very not true.
The validity of slavery.
Super not
Mr.
true.
President.
What are you talking about? There are rules in the Old Testament which was not removed one jot and tittle.
This is a clever evasion.
What is the New Testament?
What is he evading?
Okay, I will ask it again. Independent of, I'm not even asking about a particular denomination. I'm asking whoever, Sunday seems to be the challenger, good luck to him, explain to me why it is wrong, morally, objectively, fundamentally, to enslave another human being without invoking some appeal to a fundamentally irrational claim, like that human beings are all fundamentally equal. Well, why is that? The Christian answer is all human beings are endowed with inalienable rights by their creator. That's not true. That's not rational. Okay,
that's the American answer. That's not the Christian answer. The Christian answer, New Testament. New Testament. Hang on. New Testament.
I would evade it too. You can't answer.
New Testament, Young. Women can't speak in the assembly. We are not all equal, clearly.
So
women, I
one more time.
What do you think that verse means?
Hold on.
It means women can't speak in the assembly, Jeff.
Don't let Sunday bait you into his evasion.
If you guys would shut up, I will pin him to this question. But you all got to shut up so I can do it. Sunday.
All right.
Oh my God! But he fundamentally misunderstands that verse.
any other
Really?
person thinks.
What does the
core
verse mean,
question
Jeb?
is,
Okay.
why are people
Continues to
equal?
evade.
Why is anyone on this panel my equal? Why?
Well, nobody's your equal, Wick, clearly.
Well, fair enough. Okay.
That's a good answer.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's
so all humans
You
are
set him up
points
for
to
that. That's a
you.
good answer.
Points
But
to
the point
you.
still stands.
But yes, that's the fundamental question. Why are people equal?
There's no needfulness for it. I don't have to say that this is a universal constant in order to say that it is appropriate for me, given my understanding, given my values and my aims, to
Well, your
advocate
initial
to the
answer to
death
him
for
is
such and
because
such.
we are equal, right? Your initial answer to his question, why is slavery wrong, is because people are equal.
The assertion that we are equal, it stands.
Oh, someone
and-
accused me of
and
circular
irrational.
logic
Well, no.
earlier.
Well, no. I didn't claim that it was a purely rational statement. I mean,
Okay, so if it's not purely rational, what
specifically
is
human
it?
and culturally contingent.
Not purely rational is the same as what?
Sorry,
A
it's not.
rational claim is, I would say, by definition, a faith claim. What else
And
could
this
it
license
be?
and this licenses you to take as your rule book text you don't understand.
This license
And
me
then
to pin you on an answer that you can't seem to.
But what are the
articulate.
stakes? What are the stakes precisely? Because if the argument is that I can't assert an ethical
Brian, can you tell us
statement,
the stakes to not being able to?
I was
answer
actually in the
slavery's
middle of
wrong
asking that
crime?
exact
If you-
question. No, not the stakes of slavery being wrong. The stakes of not being able to assert that on the grounds of God.
Do you agree that slavery is wrong universally?
Universally. What do you mean by
Yeah, yeah.
universally?
I mean,
do I
anyone-
mean it
here's
is
what I mean.
written?
This is
Young,
no-
do you
yeah,
mean?
this is-
Do you
what
mean
do you
it
mean
is?
slavery
He's
is wrong?
answering.
Do you mean it is written in the cosmos somewhere beyond the human realm? Slavery is wrong. Is that what
No,
you're saying?
I mean, do you think it is ever acceptable to enslave another human being?
No,
Why do you think that?
because for me it is never acceptable to slave another human being.
But it could be for someone else,
It could be, yeah. Like, for example, the authors of the Old Testament.
ladies and gentlemen.
So there is no objective morality in your case. You're a
Well, let's
virtue
give other
ethics
people a
you
chance to
think-
answer this. Brutilities.
So yeah, you believe in objective morality, then, right, Jung?
Yes, like every sane, good person on this planet.
I
Yeah,
mean,
I
in
don't
order
think-
to say that slavery is objectively wrong, you would have to believe in objective morality, right?
Jeptan, let
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Brutilities go. Go ahead.
Yo,
I
you're,
am.
You're absolutely right. Okay. Since no one else wants to bite the bullet,
Hold on,
my
I have
side, I'll just bite the
to-
bullet. There is no objective morality.
One sec,
okay?
I have to
So,
log out and come back.
For one, oh,
He said he'll be back. He'll be
Yeah,
back.
he'll be back.
Yeah, he's coming right back.
Yeah.
okay.
I also think
Um,
he's watching the stream, so.
But yeah, no, there is no objective morality. So when you ask why should, how can you justify slavery is wrong without using a faith claim? You can't. But we can justify it together as a group, as a democracy, and then say, yeah, we don't want to do this because we value equality, we value freedom. Okay, religion does the same thing, just with divine authority. It doesn't mean
No,
we can't do the same
that's
thing
what-
humanly.
Well, that's the point he was making, was that a lot of ideologies are religions because they rely on faith claims, which is kind of the reason
no,
I
but
was
that's not a
memeing and
faith
But
throwing
that's
up
just
the-
asserting his definition without justifying it again.
But it is
Like,
a
it's
faith
circular.
claim. It's not. No, he justified it by demonstrating that you cannot objectively find slavery immoral without a faith claim. So anything.
But you
that
can't find it
relies on
objectively
objective
immoral either.
morality-
You're merely asserting it as
No,
objectively
we
immoral.
can. We just
That's what
accept
faith
that it's
is.
a faith
You
claim.
can't find it
Right.
objectively.
But you
That's
can't
what
because
makes
you
it
have
a
no.
religion.
Hang on.
Yes,
Wait.
we can.
Stop.
Wait.
Let Sunday,
Wait. Very
let Sunday
quickly. Wick.
give Sunday. I'm giving you space. I'm
Thank
telling
you,
people
appreciate it.
not to
Back
interrupt
off. Back
you.
off the
Okay.
president. Get your head
The
off
bear-
No one interrupt the president. Let president give his whole soliloquy, and then
Okay. Wait. We get it.
Damn.
Jeb, the bear. Where are you off camera now? Okay, so the bare fact that you have to refer to the new covenant, even in your defense, means that no, this is not universal. It's not universal. You made reference when I brought up the slavery in the Old Testament to the New Testament. However,
Yes.
here's the problem: the new covenant is not universal in time. So there are contexts in which that doesn't apply because the Old Testament validates slavery of specific kinds.
lack
wrong.
of knowledge
Sorry.
lack of knowledge is not indication that that is not true for the people who don't understand it.
No,
2
hold
plus
on.
2
What the
equals
fuck
4.
are you talking about?
Hold
It's
on,
in
stop.
the
Water-
Bible, you idiot.
Water is H2O regardless of whether or not people are able to articulate that fact.
No, but President Sunday's right in a way, but he's wrong in that it counters what we're saying as Christians who believe in the entire Bible. Christianity doesn't
Christian
Well, you clearly don't.
But
Okay.
it does,
So,
because it was not universally true.
Do you even know the second half of the sentence I haven't said? You dumb fuck.
I actually was raised
before I
Christian.
finish.
Fondue for $2 has said, if we are
Let's
in
be a bit
hell,
more
Sunday
Christian
is
here.
holding the fork.
Of course, fondue. No, but the Christians don't believe that Christianity hasn't changed over time. We don't believe that
It's immaterial.
that-
Immaterial.
No, it's not. You literally
Yes,
tried
it
to
is.
argue against me, saying that, well, it's
Okay.
not the same through time.
Universal
We don't believe
means
it's the same
universal,
through
Jeff.
time.
Yeah.
Not universal now. It means universal.
No, yes, it does.
Then why
mean
did you
universal.
ask what P.F. Jung meant by universal? If universal is universal,
Because P.F. Jung doesn't know what's meant by universal.
No, what we understand is
That's
that
fair.
what we understand in Christianity is that there are universal objective moral truths that are true through time, and that
Well, that's not true.
the
Like, for example,
religious
there's
scholar-
divine command
and
theory.
that-
But you're
and-
wrong, Jeb. Jeb.
No, you don't,
Jeb.
because you're not listening
Jeb.
to the second half of
Jeb.
what I'm saying. You dumb fuck!
Jeb.
Shut the fuck up and let me
Jeb.
finish the sentence.
Yeah, that's not
Jeb.
very Christian of you, man.
Read what
New
the Bible
Testament
says about how you should
declare-
comport
the New
yourself. You
Testament-
act as a
The
heathen
New
does.
I
Testament
agree with Sunday.
declares. The New Testament declares
So your ball cap
that
looks stupid.
that the Pharisees that were that were kind of the checklist Christians that looked at Levitican law and said that is the entirety of what Christianity is, got their interpretation wrong. And that is why if you look at the story of Jesus Christ, with Jesus Christ as the protagonist, his antagonist was the Pharisees, who were the religious scholars.
I've got a
of the
little
time of
test.
Judaism,
Can I play a little
even though
game
he
quickly?
was
Wick,
a
will you indulge
Jew.
me? Will you indulge me?
I don't know how much I want to indulge you, but I guess I will
If
But
say
there's
we
Wick.
can get,
yes.
Thank you, Miss Millie, for the sub. If we can get another, one more sub in the next 30 seconds, I'll indulge him. But just to let everyone know, right? Like this,
Yeah.
there's so much we could have discussed today. So many
Young is
branches.
outside.
I know, but you brought in stupid panelists. I don't know what to say. Who was the guy you left? He might have been the saving grace.
Eucharist? Not for you.
From the
Maybe not.
heavens
I
I
don't know if you
return.
would. Well, no, Eucharist would have
I
technically been on
disappeared for
the
3 days
declared
and then
side.
returned to the
Okay,
earth.
Mad Honey, if you can give me $20, I will not indulge him. Mad Honey, $20.
Well, no,
and I will
indulge-
refuse to indulge.
Bait
Sunday
and
in this
switch.
little game.
Have him pay you $20 and still indulge PS, please.
Yeah,
'Cause I do want to hear what he has
this
to
is
say.
a bidding war.
Well, no, then nobody will pay him again.
Bidding war right now.
True,
The
fair
most
enough. I have
money
to piss real quick during
is
this
what
bidding
I
I do
indulge.
too, actually.
Okay. Right. While they go, and we can actually maybe have a discussion without being interrupted.
Oh wow,
Well,
amazing.
the
Very-
broader point about no objective morality, I thought might be interesting to pursue a little bit further.
Yeah, why do you
very
very
think
related
has
to
to
Did
do
you
with
religion.
have something that you wanted
morality?
to say because you haven't been able to talk while these guys have having their dick measuring match the entire time?
Who are you talking to?
Fairy Queen. I was asking if she has anything to say
On to this question
or anything.
Morality.
or anything to say.
Not morality.
To be honest with you, I will be very. I'll just be very blunt with you. Like I currently am at a crossroads with my own like philosophical development because on the one hand, I do have an objective sense of morality, but on the other hand, I find it difficult to justify. So that's probably a topic for me personally, at least with somebody else for another time, if that makes sense. So I feel uncomfortable answering the question at this point. I don't feel like I could give a proper response to it.
That's fair, and I think a lot of people are there too, which is why they then turn
Mad
to some
Honeybee,
divine
thank
authority.
you for the $20. Do what I want with this money. Okay, so we're gonna have to have at least $21.
You're not
in the
indulging
Pro
PS?
Sunday. Yeah.
Fairy Queen, that was a
He took a
wildly
longer piss than
respectable
you.
answer,
You gotta-
by the way.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. And I guess so we can kind of maybe get something before we kind of start winding this down.
Objective morality?
No, hold on. I'm trying to think of how to phrase this, please. To the people, to Prime, right, who wants to move away from religion, who wants to move away from these values, who wants to move away from religious thinking and religious institutions. What are some of the dangers that you fear from doing this? Like, do you see any potential downsides?
I guess I get started and everyone else can finish
Yeah, I
up.
asked you directly, and then I'll ask the
yeah.
others as well.
Sure. I think I already started down that road talking about what happens when we don't have the infrastructure to replace all the things that religion currently provides, right? Mainly being that the social settings, the ability to, like, okay, for instance, I have a this is actually really interesting because I have a friend and they are Korean and they go to this Korean church, right?
Yeah.
And it's fantastic. Like from what I hear about it, right? I've gone to like their events, right? You know, as a dirty non-believer infiltrator, I've gone to the events. Like they got like sports events. They got like barbecuing. They have all kinds of things. And
Community,
like
yeah. Go ahead.
they have a community and things that they do for each other. For instance, is like take care of each other's kids. They provide daycare, like an informal daycare setting. And my friend, I remember talking to my friend about it. He knows I'm a non-believer, and he's like, "Yeah, I could never leave this church because it provides. I get so much out of it, and like friends for life that he has. And like if I plucked him out of that immediately, right, like his life would be worse without a doubt."
Yeah.
Now we can do things to replace these things, like for instance, like a universal daycare, right? We can provide these things. We could have like civics, like a civic sports thing, right? Like a, I'm talking about like a citywide sports events that people can be part of. We can do various things, but they're not integrated, right? There's no like one organization that provides that, like a one-stop shop for like social fulfillment. So that's where I see a danger that if we don't provide these things, what will end up is like people going on Facebook being lonely during a pandemic and like reading about, oh hey, bleach is a cure-all for everything, right? Give it to your kids, and then the social environment that we provide is enough for you to buy into this completely to the detriment of your own health.
Yeah, I think that speaks to the frustration I have sometimes with defending religion as a whole, because I do believe obviously some are better than others and some preach things better than others, and a lot of Christians get it wrong by not actually delving into the truth of the word. I 100% agree with Fairy Queen's thing that I'm a Protestant because the truth-seeking, analytical nature of Protestantism. I want to know what the truth of the words mean, and I resent the churches that don't focus as much on that. And I think that that's the one unique part of religion, though, for the core of this conversation is what is to get people to provide all of those things for one another when it doesn't benefit their selfish interest, if not for some sort of religious morality that tells you to do so.
Sunday,
did we agree that you'd indulge me quickly?
No, someone paid me $20 not to, so unless I get more than $20 too.
Okay, well, just very quickly. So you say you care about the truth of the word, Jeb.
Yes.
Can you name one Bible translator for me?
Yeah. I mean, wait, what do you mean? Like, what do you classify as a Bible translator?
King James.
Dealer's choice. King James didn't translate the Bible.
Yes, but he hired the team. I mean, he oversaw it, right? I can't name the fucking translator himself, right?
I mean, everyone is a translator of the Bible.
You have no idea who you're reading. You have no idea.
I mean, yeah,
you are so unserious. You have no notion of who you're reading or where you're getting any of this from.
I think the question is unserious, but sure.
Brutilities. Question. Same question I asked Prime.
Yep.
What is your fear? Right? Do you have any fears? If we move to the system you want, where it's non-religious, where we do away with these institutions, where we transcend beyond, right? What are some downsides that you could potentially see?
I think the biggest downside is the one that I think is currently happening with happiness rates going down, is that with an absence of religion, it seems like nihilism kind of creeps in. It's the natural next step, really. And I think that we need to figure out a way to step over that into the next step, which I would say is finding that meaning of life that everyone keeps asking, but religion provides so easily, so effortlessly, really. Without religion, you could search for it for the rest of your life and never find it. So,
what's your solution to nihilism?
My solution's a bit of a, I guess, probabilistic one in a sense, where I was super nihilistic for a while, and then at some point I realized, from a naturalistic standpoint, from like Big Bang devolution to being here now, everything was stacked against us, that it's kind of so amazing and so beautiful that we're even here in the first place, and that kind of brought me meaning.
Do you think that's a anecdote for other people, or does that only work for you?
I hope. I don't know.
Because I would
haven't had a
say
chance to tell that many people.
you could just as easily craft a narrative that all of that was stacked up against to just get here. It's incredible that we're here in this moment. And then
And it's
of all the
unlikely
lives,
we'll get past this point.
or
Yeah.
of all the lives I could have lived, the life I'm living is so characterized by suffering that this is actually hell on earth. So I don't think that's enough of a convincing point, because if someone's life is so filled with suffering, then they wouldn't buy into anything you're saying.
Yeah, that's true. The quality of the life, is affected, or vice versa. Sorry, the view is affected by the quality of life. That's true. But even then, suffering is a given in such a chaotic and dysfunctional universe in the first place.
Right. But religion provides often antidotes
True,
out of that
and then
suffering.
it also provides a bunch of other baggage that I
Well, sure.
think is,
It's all about
so
net utility.
Question to the other side, if I may. To those of you who say religion is good and religion should be stand and should religio, right?
Which hilariously includes me.
What are
We're on your side, Mr. President.
Yeah,
We're on your side.
what would some, if any, do you see any benefit to mitigating it, doing away with it, getting around it, or if Prime's utopia were to come to pass, right, and we moved entirely away from religion, can you not acknowledge any good that might come from it? And if so, what?
No, I can
Well,
acknowledge a ton.
I think not conditioning children to be fearful of scientific inquiry or with a non-mythological understanding of the origins of our species, the nature of life on this planet, things of that sort. I think that's a positive, but I don't think that's removing religion. I think these are specific organizational and cultural structures that have toxicity about them. Keeping I just don't think that touches on what religion is. I disagree entirely with
The premise?
my two unfortunate compatriots as to what religion is to begin with, but
Fateful compatriots. Fate has brought us here Sunday by the power of God. You are
Wick
defending.
has brought you here, right?
Fate
That's
is
true.
a
That's
fate is
what I
a
meant.
brought
True
you
God,
here,
really.
and you
Fate
are
is a
correct.
pagan notion.
On this
By the
panel,
grace of Wick.
on this panel, I am God. Okay.
Yeah,
I'm-
but
I
I'm
brought
officially
you
a
life.
Wiccan.
I can say silence, Jebtan, and behold, silence, right? I can say let him speak, and behold, he speaks, right?
Cool. So I'll speak. Anyway, to clarify what I agree with President Sunday is, I think by getting, obviously, religious people have very strong opinions on what the right religion is, and I think by getting rid of religion, you get rid of a lot of wrong ones. So that would be a really positive one. I think you would get rid of. I resent the Catholic Church quite a bit for their fear of scientific inquiry. I resent the Scientology Church for essentially not even being a church and hiding behind that IRS definition of church in order to just rake in a bunch of money with their fucking Ponzi scheme.
Oh, Jeb's an evolutionist. What a twist.
But generally, I think there's a lot of good that would happen, but I think the good of religion outweighs the bad. And obviously, if I think the fundamental truth of life is a religious truth, I can't support getting rid of religion.
Although I am curious, like, are you an evolutionist or are you an anti-evolutionist?
No, I believe in evolution.
Really?
Yeah.
Nice.
Intriguing.
Fairy Queen, you had your hand up?
Has Jung responded yet? I apologize.
No,
I don't want
Young
to.
has not. But if you
What
wanted
was
to-
the
Okay.
question?
He doesn't even know the question. So Fairy Queen,
Step on his
respond.
fucking toes,
Well,
please.
I am the
Use him.
lonely heathen. I did not answer your question to our side of the aisle,
Yeah.
so I'd like an opportunity to do that. So your question is, what are we afraid of? Well, I guess what I would be afraid of is that we lose learning the history of religion. We lose the actual history of what the religion's influence upon the society, religion's influence upon the way the state has been formed, religion's influence on literature, on the way that many literary theorists over the years have chosen to interpret literature, the music, the art, and the poetry that was inspired by it. I think that it is important to study religion and to understand it. But I also think that the benefit of that is just because you understand something does not mean that you accept it. And to answer Jung's question about what if you're a nihilist and what if you're how do you resolve that? My answer is for me personally, to devote your life to protecting innocent people, to not think about your suffering, but to think about the suffering of other people.
Pretty good.
And I don't think that you can honestly, intellectually do that and be completely committed to the religious institutions as they stand currently, as for reasons that I stated earlier.
There's
I
no
agree.
reason why within a secular future that we wouldn't like have history classes where we talked about how religion influenced. Of course, like it's a major part of humanity's evolution. So you could, I mean, if that's your fear, I don't think it's founded really.
Prime,
It's
totally,
also
Was the
totally invalidating everything the woman on the panel has said.
I'm sorry.
Young, go ahead.
Prime the
question
masculine.
is, what would we fear if we lost religion?
Well, the question to you is,
Mhm.
do you think that there's any benefit to mitigating or getting rid of religion? Right? I asked the fear to the one side.
Would
I'm
be a
asking
benefit?
the benefits to your side. Yeah.
I'd feel less guilty paying for hookers and cocaine.
Fair enough.
True.
Is
I don't know.
Yep.
is
Benefits.
that a this is a little bit of a side question, but this is something I've been bouncing around. Hedonism, based or cringe?
The nihilist religion.
Cringe. I think even a lot of atheists and agnostics think cringe. Cringe.
Yeah, and they're wrong. But yeah.
I don't
So
know.
you're base? You say base, brutalist?
Oh, based as fuck,
Brutilities?
dude. What do you mean?
Okay.
Prime, base cringe.
I mean, if it's hedonism that doesn't involve hurting others, then there's nothing wrong with that. Like, great.
Can hedonism involve not hurting others though?
I
course it
don't.
can.
I mean,
How does it
The
necessitate
question is whether or
what?
not, of course it can. If a person on a desert island can be a hedonist and not hurting others, the question is whether or not you have some kind of duty to manifest some kind of good in yourself that hinders. I would say in
I mean,
general,
if
probably.
the hedonism is the pursuit of personal pleasure, how can you guarantee you're not going to hurt anybody if you're
Well,
only
there are
pursuit of
different
personal pleasure?
hedonistic theories, right? For example, there are some that argue that really what we're doing right now isn't self-motivated by hedonism. If you're talking about like strictly despite the fact that we have all of these internal barriers and things to certain types of actions and certain types of license and indulgence, we just go ahead and do it anyways. I mean, of course it's cringe because it's the reason why we have those things is because they're destructive of ourselves and they don't mesh well with our surrounding societies.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Is the pursuit of personal pleasure is generally cringe because we end
Well,
up
no,
needing to
because
create
that's-
barriers to limit personal
Well,
pleasure.
no,
in order to
because
allow
because
people to
because
pursue
the
personal
argument
pleasure.
against the dumb type of hedonism that I was just talking about may also be motivated by hedonism. It may be motivated towards maximizing things like pleasure and increasing your gusto or whatever over a longer span and getting more of it that way. It just might be a pragmatic way of going about it,
Okay.
but it's still hedonistic in its motives.
On that note, right? I want to respect everyone's time. We have gone a little bit over time, but I've enjoyed the conversation as much as a conversation like this can be enjoyed, right? I've mixed feelings on how
Thank
this
you,
has
Wick.
gone tonight. I do appreciate you all for coming. I want to give you all a brief outros, right? And so, yeah, just tell us your closing thoughts on the matter of religion, right? And shout yourselves out and tell us where we can find you and how we can worship at your altars, right? But if you are watching this on YouTube, worship at my altar by hitting that like button and that subscribe button. Follow me on Twitch if you have yet to do so. Throw me gift subs, throw me bits. I cannot do this for free. You have to fund, right, the WhickTatorship as it rolls into our glorious hedonistic future, right, where Wick will be your guiding light. No, nihilism is not the way. That is the dark path. Go on the path of light. Follow your bearded savior, Wick.
God King.
Thank you. Okay, with that, Brutilities, go ahead.
Yeah, you can find me at Brutilities on Twitter. I'm pretty sure I saved the name for like Twitch or the other streaming things. Final thoughts. Hedonism is based because pleasure can be everybody's pleasure if that's what pleases you. I know you're going to say, well, objective morality, blah, 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 but I don't think there is a thing, and I think we can all group together and figure out what's best for everybody without religion. Fuck it.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. You did great. Appreciate you with your thoughts and coming in and fighting the good fight for godlessness and hell. Thank you.
Heathen.
Fairy Queen.
Well, Wick, I will admit I hate to be a bummer on the panel, but I did feel a little disappointed by our conversation tonight. We spent a lot of time talking about, as I predicted, a lot of the hot button topics around religion. But I think that we need to move to a space where we can talk about not why religion is literally false and not the actual empirical problems with religion, but some of the more metaphorical and literary criticisms that people have had of religion. an anti-Jordan Peterson take, if you will. I think that there isn't just a literal reason to be against religion. There are moral reasons to be against religion too. And I wish that we could have spent more time getting into that, as well as into the more of the mystical and literary traditions around religious texts.
Well, I as well wish, but we had to argue semantics and pedantics. But that's okay. Thank you for being here. I appreciate you putting up with us, Fairy Queen. Where can people find you?
At the Pink Pill Podcast on YouTube. We are anti-red pill content. That is our goal. That is our aim.
Okay, well, thank you for being here. Always appreciate you. I hope this doesn't dissuade you from more panels in the future with me. Next up, we have 𝕵𝖎𝖙, right? If there is any, some call him the John the Baptist of the panel world because he paves the way. He heralds a bright future whenever he is.
He has no head.
Go ahead, 𝕵𝖎𝖙.
Wait, what? I don't have a head. Anyway, I'm 𝕵𝖎𝖙. I don't do too much as far as my own stream, but 𝕵𝖎𝖙 RIP on Twitter, and I'll pop up on Wix panels every now and then. So instead of shouting my own Twitch out, I am going to be on a panel in 45 minutes on Rumble on 𝕵𝖎𝖎's channel. Make sure to tune into that after Wick is no longer live. Specifically, after Wick is no longer live, go to rumble.com and go on 𝕵𝖎𝖎's channel to see me on a panel about Ron DeSantis and the future of the GOP.
Boy.
Okay, wow. Lick? Really? Lick?
It's what I want to do to
There's
you,
some
Wick. I'm sorry.
indulgences that you can give me to make up for your error. Okay, with some gift subs, but
I'll indulge you for sure.
PF Young, go ahead.
Thank you once again, Wick. I thought this panel was perfect. No errors whatsoever. Tremendous, phenomenal, incredible. Thank you for having me. I will say to Brutalist and Fairy Queen, as well as others, perhaps even President Sunday himself, I do agree a more deeper, nuanced, less entertainment-based discussion around theology, metaphorical interpretations of religion are interesting. I will shamelessly plug and send you I think my most popular, not my most popular, but one of my higher quality videos on explaining Jordan Peterson's most complex idea, the metaphorical substrate. And if you find that interesting, and if you find it sufficiently intellectually stimulating, I'd be happy to discuss it with you on my stream, or we could discuss it anywhere that you guys would like. Because I do very much find the difference in the ideology and the archetype. That is a complex, nuanced thing. That this, admittedly, while this was a perfect panel, by all means, tremendous, wonderful, no panel better out there, it does not necessarily permit of the most nuanced theological discussions, and I'd be happy to entertain that with anyone.
Thank you for
but other
being
than
here.
that,
I posted the link
thank you, Wick.
to this particular video in my chat on YouTube and Twitch. Check it out if you like. Give them a follow or subscribe.
Well, thank you, Wick.
No
Also, can I
problem.
also say,
Yes.
very good to see you, Prime Kai. It has been too long. I'm glad we were able to. The last panel we were on, I believe, was about religion. So, oh, we
I'm
come
sensing
full
a theme.
circle. Time is a circle. Yes.
True. Speaking of circles, right? President Sunday.
So everybody on this panel was useless with the exception of Brutilities, I think I got your name right, and Fairy Queen. No conditions, you're free to come on and chat after this if you like or whenever. H3O is also water.
Okay, gang, check him out. President Sunday bullied his way on this panel, right? He was not an
I'm
initial
bullying my
invite.
way
He
out.
asserted
There we go.
himself.
He bullied his way in here, which was a blessing in disguise because Eucharist
He
could not
held
make it.
masculine frame.
Eucharist could not make it, and so Dollar Store Eucharist is with us in the form of President Sunday. So thank you for being here, and I'm sure we'll see him again in the very near future. Next up, the man, the myth, the legend, right? Many a storied tale has began and ended with this one individual. He has made and broke, right, people, right, on the altar of worship, right? Many go through him to find greatness and glory, including me. He was the mountain which I climbed, right, to reach the summit on which I now sit. Prime Kai.
I love the thought of you all over me, climbing me.
Mm.
That's very hot. But anyway, this was this was a lot of fun. With the except for Sunday. I really enjoyed like all the participants here. The only person I'd previously been on a panel with is our friend P.F. Young here, who I really want to talk to again. Again, guys is fantastic, even when I'm disagreeing with them. But all the rest of you too. We're really lovely to meet. And I really hope that we can come. I hope you'd maybe come on to my panel sometime and have a good time. And shout out to my man, Wick, who is fantastic. I love him so much. And Wick, like you're on my mind, like so sorry. Because like I said, the last time you were on my panel, right? You're on with Scott. I told you how like I'm like completely immune to his provocations, but not to yours, right? So our last thing talking about like the Democratic Party and what's the point of the DNC, that stuck with me, and I was like finding myself arguing against a phantom Wick the entire time. Like,
Good.
fuck you, Wick! God damn it!
Good. Oh, speaking of, I'll have to invite you because other people have challenged me on this take, and I'm going to hold a show on it at some point, and I'll reach out when it's time, right?
Oh,
and hopefully
please,
we can get a
absolutely.
guest moderator, right? So I don't have to moderate, right? Maybe someone will be able to
or you
know.
just pass each of us a blade, and
We'll
then we
figure
just
it
go
out.
at it. See
We'll
what
Give me a
comes
day
out
and
of it.
time. Give me a day and time, Wick.
But anyway,
Even
where can people find you?
You can find me twitch.tv/PrimeKai, PRIMECEYES, and also on YouTube, same spelling. I'll be doing more streams on YouTube, so come check me out there if that's where you want to be. And thank you again to everyone here. You guys were fantastic. Really love the conversation.
Okay, and with that, we're gonna
Can I say one last thing real quick?
real quick.
30 not even 20 seconds. Now that President Sunday's gone, I'd never say this to his face. But I really enjoy talking to President Sunday, and he has a unique charm and charisma about
He
him.
enjoyed talking to you.
That's fine. That's fine. Like I said, I wouldn't say this to his face, but he has a really nice level of charisma that is just unbelievably mysterious, and yet somehow
Not the word I'd use, but
he
it
manages.
was
He
fun.
manages to.
Okay.
Be
Enough of
himself
that.
anyway.
Enough of that. Okay, what we got coming up?
Yeah, enough of that shit.
Monday, 6 p.m. Eastern, I'm going to have the 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙 on, who has made some serious accusations about the DGG community, and she has decided to come on my show and air those accusations out in public about the misogyny inherent within the DGG community. We'll see if there's any merit to these claims, or is this going to be simply another Destiny Report 2.0? I don't know. We're going to find out. And I'll give her the opportunity and the platform to talk about it. And I will absolutely listen and see what she has to say. For now, we're going to raid out. We're going to raid Nina. We're going to raid into Nina. So what we're going to do once we get there is we're going to spam slurs. No, I'm kidding. What we're going to do is spam my emotes, okay? And we're going to tell her that Wick sent you, okay? And with that, we'll see you guys Monday, 6 p.m.
Nina's dope.